Yes, we are live on day 2 for the North Carolina pre-licensing course. And so we've got through this part how the main broker license covers all these different aspects of real estate. By the way, the auctioneering one, you need a real estate license and you also need another license too. Any guesses what other kind of license you might need to be an auctioneer? There you go. Look at that. Magic. Genius. Yeah, you need both. You got it. And they like to test you on that too. So watch out for that. An auctioneer would need a auctioneer's license as well as a real estate license, because you need the real estate license because you're helping another person sell their house for money. And you need the auctioneer's license because you're doing it with that method specifically. I don't even know firsthand or like a direct friend or acquaintance. I don't know any auctioneers. So it's not something that's just all over the place. But it's something that's out there. The one who's saying all the fast words at the auction that we all think about, who's talking super fast, the same guy that they hire to do the tax tag and title verbiage at the end of the car commercials, probably. That guy is not the auctioneer, by the way. That guy is called a crier. And the crier is hired by the auctioneer. So the crier doesn't need a license. Just because you're talking fast doesn't require the license of real estate. It's the one who is using auctioneering or auctioning as a way to get the property sold. And that could be his boss, right? So we'll talk a little more about that later. But broker license is all that's required for all of these things except for the auctioneering thing. The other thing that's required as far as education is just how to do these various components, because these are all very different animals. Commercial real estate versus residential, night and day. It's more litigious, I would dare say, possibly. Like using lawsuits might be a little more common in commercial. It's a much bigger set or list of due diligence items. Due diligence meaning you need to do your research, you need to do all your investigation, do your due diligence, like get inspections done, have a survey, get it appraised, all the things that a buyer might want to do that could influence their decision to go through with the sale would be the due diligence process. And so in residential real estate, that list of due diligence items and inspections far smaller, far shorter than in a commercial transaction. Commercial, part of what they're doing is maybe checking the soil samples on the various parts of the property to see if the soil compacts in a certain way so they can build the huge warehouse if that's what they're doing. It could be environmental studies, like is there a protected area nearby, an underground stream, something that could be affected by the use that's about to happen? Because if it's an industrial use, maybe they're creating some sort of toxic waste. How's that going to be handled? What's been done on the property before? On the commercial side, maybe they buried some trash. There's like a undiscovered dump somewhere on the back acre of a 40-acre parcel. So all that stuff comes into play. And so if you're going to get into commercial real estate, you need to have the guidance of other people in commercial real estate, obviously. Property management, now that has it's sort of like auctioneering. There's a little asterisk to it. There's a little extra thing you need to know about being a property manager. Being a property manager is going to require that you are a full broker. You can't be a provisional broker to be a property manager because there's more to it. It's an extra level of agency responsibility when you're in property management. You actually sign some things on behalf of your property owner client because you're managing the property that they own. So you're actually doing some stuff on their behalf more so than you would if you were just helping them sell the property. When we help people sell things, we never sign contracts for them. We say, explain the contract, we show them and tell them how this thing works, but then they're the one who makes the decisions. They're the one who signs the papers. When you're a property manager, there's a little more of a level where you sign some things on their behalf. So in a minute, we'll talk about the 3 overarching kinds of agency. And property management is a higher level than sales when it comes to our responsibility and what we can do on behalf of our client. Because again, as a property manager, your client is the owner of the property. you're managing for them. Tenant representation down here, that might be something that a lot of you get into in the early part of your career because you want to just make connections. And so you might have somebody who says to you, well, I don't want to buy right now. I can't buy right now. I'm working on my credit. I just need to find someplace to rent. Can you help me with that? And you could. You could try to find them someplace to rent. Are you going to make a bunch of money at it? Not in this area. In California on HGTV, they make like $5,000 for placing a renter, but those properties are much bigger too. Here, you might make $100 or maybe 1% of the first month's rent. It's going to be a couple $100 maybe, but it's more about making the relationship because in 12 months, when that lease is up, are they going to want to buy something? And if you did a good enough job, stayed in touch with them along the way, maybe you're their person in the future. So it's a long game. But it's also for a lot of you who said, I want to help people. There's a way to help people. It's not going to pay you much, but you are building relationships. And a lot of this business for the long term is about the relationships. They got to learn to trust you and love you over time. So don't just look for the quick and easy money. That's the mistake. And I think that's where a lot of people end up out of the business because they're only picking and choosing what they think is going to be money in a month from now. Is this a deal today? Can I get them into something right now? That's a different mindset. You got to have the mindset of, I don't care when you're going to do something. I just want to be your buddy. So you do that with me when you do it, right? And you truly are invested in their best interest. Sometimes you have to give them advice. And that advice is don't buy right now. But you're thinking to yourself, but I really hope you do because I got to pay the light bill. And that's a very real challenge. But you have to give them the advice that benefits them, not you. Because as a real estate agent, you got to put that client first and foremost. That's the big difference, even to the point where you might not get paid sometimes, or maybe not get paid right away. I had one time, and it was what we call a domino effect, because the house he needed to sell it in order to buy the next place. And I was going to help him with both things. So I helped him find the property. It was like 16 acres. It's going to make like a family compound, he and his wife, and then their grown son and his wife. And so that was in place. We made the offer. It got accepted. We needed to sell his house in order to buy that house. But the buyer we got for his house also needed to sell a house. So now we've got that buyer's buyer, the buyer for his house, the one he wanted to buy, like 4 or 5 in a row. By the time it was all done, maybe about 3 weeks before closing, the original buyer at the head of the line decided not to buy that house. And so the house they were going to buy but changed their mind, couldn't buy my people's house, and so my people couldn't buy the one they wanted to buy. And it all fell apart. And I had done work. I had shown them a bunch of houses to begin with. We had walked a lot of acres in the woods and sticky bushes and gone through some really old, junky looking property because it was all about sort of, they were horse people. So horse people don't really care much about what the house looks like. They like the land first. And it all just went away. And so I could have been mad about it. I could have fussed and said, well, why don't you put the house back on the market? We can find a replacement buyer. And they just didn't want to. But I let it, I fostered the relationship. I was like, okay, you guys do what you got to do to be comfortable. I didn't ask them to pay me anything, even though I had produced a ready, willing, and able buyer for their house. I could have literally sued them for the commission at that point. We'll learn more about that in chapter 7 and 8. But that would probably have killed the relationship, right? For what? For one commission that I may or may not have even gotten. A year later, they called me and said, okay, we're ready again. And what had happened in that year was I left where I was, went to my own company, and my own company, guess what? My BIC is really nice to me. He brushes his teeth with me every morning. We look at each other in the bathroom mirror because it's me, and he pays me 100% commission split. And so a year later, when they did decide to do something, I got more of the piece. I got all of the piece. Plus it was it was a multiple contracts, multiple transactions. So that's the lesson. Keep the relationship above all else. So that tenant representation thing can really work, but it's a long-term kind of thing. You're not getting much up front. Oh, question. Did I see somebody with a question? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. They could be, sure. One of the properties you help them get into for the rental could be one where they are working their way toward buying it. And so every little bit of rent every month, portion of that, or maybe even all of it, is going toward the purchase price later. So yeah, you could be the reason that they found that rent to buy opportunity. And so then the question is, are you going to get paid on that when they do, if they do decide to exercise the purchase? One thing about rent to own, a lot of times the person with high hopes doesn't do the thing that they have to do in the next 12 months to be able to buy it. So a lot of times the rent to buy doesn't actually turn out because they didn't fix their credit, essentially, just to get right down to it. And so that money they were going to have toward the purchase price just goes away because it was just rent because they never did the buy part. But you're going to want to know, am I going to get compensated when they do buy it? And that could be a part of the whole thing that may or may not actually work out. Jara, is that the right way to pronounce it? Let me make sure I ask now. Jara, got it. So Jara, let's see. We're talking about basically content from the comments PDF. We're not even in chapter 1 yet. Great question. So in the syllabus, we would actually be in section 21 because it's all the way at the end because I want to give you a nice head start foundation of the license law and commission rules component, because again, I want that to be something you're building on throughout the entire course. I don't want you to wait to dive into that until the 8th week, because I want you to be real good with it by the time we get to that 8th week. So we're not even 1 yet. So in the syllabus, you'll find this stuff in the first part. In fact, let me see if I can share that with you. There's the comment section. Let's look at the syllabus. And if we go all the way down to syllabus section 21, which is almost to the end. There it is. Syllabus page 105. We've talked and we've seen already in the slides, basic licensing requirement, the license categories. It's kind of what we're talking about now. We're about to get into this one, limited non-resident commercial. So we are in the syllabus basically. Notice in the syllabus, the blue links. So if you have this open on your computer, you can click that link and it will pop up whatever that link is that you clicked to the general statute, license, law, commission rule item. So that can be handy, right? If you want to flip over real quick and see the official place where the license law says that a license is required when you're doing real estate for another person for compensation, for instance. So yeah, we're making our way on down through a couple things since you mentioned that. And since we're looking at this in the syllabus, again, this is section 21 of the syllabus. We normally won't get to it for another month or couple of months actually, but we're going to look at, let's see, let's see. Where'd my Roman numerals go? This is the new syllabus that they just came out with. And we're missing some Roman numerals. But what we're going to talk about tonight, at first, when we dive into this topic, we're going to go through here, the exemptions when you can do real estate for another person but not have a license. That's what this whole section is about. Who is on the real estate commission? We'll be getting into that tonight as well. Here it is, C. So the comment section that I keep talking about, that's this thing, right? This thing has just about everything you need to know as to license, law, and commission rules, except for 10 items. The 10 items that you won't find mentioned in the comments section are here in letter C of the syllabus under general licensing provisions. And it's pretty basic stuff. We'll get to it in a minute, but just note that letter C is not, and it says so. This section is not discussed in the license law and commission rules comment section, but it still has to be covered. It's the easy stuff. It's the thing like there's a provisional broker license, requires pre-licensing class and post-licensing education. That thing I mentioned called petition for predetermination, how you can find out if you have a more colorful history that you might not have a shot at getting the license. You could just let the commission examine the situation and tell you that up front. And expiration and renewal and continuing education, active status, license reinstate. We're going to go through all of that. So it's pretty basic 10 items, but all of these 10 items are not mentioned in the comment section. So just note that in your notes that letter C plus the comment section is going to be what you need to know for the exam. Now, all that stuff is what we're going to talk about pretty much tonight. The next section of the comment section, license law, commission rules, we're going to get into in a couple of weeks. We'll get more into this later, and it's a big one. It's like pages 5 through 10, I think. Misrepresentation and omission. Those are huge. In fact, they're level 3 because these are all things that agents do that harm consumers. So the commission really wants you to know what not to do. And so that's a whole section in and of itself, figuring out, reading the test question about what some bad agent did and figuring out what are they guilty of. Are they guilty of negligent omission or negligent misrepresentation or willful omission or willful misrepresentation? So that'll be a section that we cover later. And then let's see, trust accounts, trust funds. We'll get into that too at a later time. You need to know about other people's money, the earnest money deposit, and where do you put it in a trust account? Does your firm have a trust account? It may not. Firms don't have to. It could be that we use the attorney's trust account to put the earnest money in. So we'll get into all that. And then timeshares. Timeshares, I have a way to kind of keep that pretty simple and show you what that's about too. For now, we're going to have a little break. So I'll see you back here in 10 minutes. Okay. Yep. So different license categories. Provisional broker license is what you're going to start with. Then you have a certain amount of time. Counting down. How much time do you have as a newly appointed provisional broker to become a non-provisional broker? How many months? I'll give you a hint. Look at that. Good job. 18 months, during which you have to take what? You have 18 months to take something. 3 courses. You got it. How long are those courses in hours? 30-hour courses. 3 of them, 90 total hours. Good job. Those courses are called post-licensing because you're doing them after you got the license, right? Having taken those courses taking those courses has to happen whether you activate your license or not. So watch out for that one. Be careful. They like to test you on that sort of thing. You're going to be a provisional inactive license holder. What do you do to convert your license to active status instead of inactive? There you go. Pick a BIC, find a firm to affiliate with. Then they sign up and they tell the real estate commission, he's with me, she's with me, and now you are on active status. But you don't have to do that, but just to still have to take the courses. I've had plenty of post-licensing students who did not join a firm right away. They never activated, but they still had to take the post classes. And so they'd say things like, well, I don't actually work in the business yet, still inactive. Why? Because maybe they just want to go ahead and get a lot of that education out of the way before they dive in. It doesn't matter, but you can do either one. And how fast can you take post classes? As fast as you can find them available to take. There are some for butts in seats, physical, be there, show up in person. There are some like this on Zoom. In fact, you could also take them self-directed. What does that mean? You could take this class self-directed for that matter. Pre-licensing every single class, pre-licensing all 3 post classes, and continuing ed elective classes. All of those could be taken in the format where you pay for the class, you log in, and you hit the play button. And you read things, you watch videos, you never see a live instructor like me. Every class except one. The only one that is not allowed to be self-directed in that way is the continuing education update course. That's got to be at least via Zoom, if not in person. Now, there are some pluses and minuses to that. The pluses are 2 a.m, if that's when you have available, you can hit the play button and watch and make your way through. The negative is you're probably going to fall asleep because not only is it late at night, it's probably a little dry. It might be kind of boring. And so, but if that's the thing that fits your schedule the best, it's an option. So just be aware of that. You could do those post classes pre-recorded, self-directed like that. We talked about broker in charge and BIC eligible. The broker in charge, of course, is the person who's in that office location in charge or over all of those brokers, both provisionals and non-provisionals. And that BIC is on the line. They are very much responsible and can get in trouble if a provisional broker that they're in charge of screws up. They are less responsible for the actions of the non-provisional brokers. But there are two areas that they have to be on top of things with for everybody, including non-provisionals. One of those is making sure they keep their licenses active, making sure that non-provisional knows, oh, I need to renew and I need to take my CE. They'll remind them. And then also advertising. That's a big one. So no matter what the license status, provisional or non, the broker in charge has to make sure everybody's running ads correctly. It's so easy to run ads now. Obviously, it used to be all about billboards and print ads in the magazines, but now you could crank out a Facebook post and that's an ad. You got a new listing, you could stand out in the line at the grocery store, the self-checkout line that forms at Walmart, and crank out a post real quick, but you better do it right. And a good BIC is going to make sure you have proper training, because if you do something wrong, if you don't put the fact that you're a broker when you run the ad, if you accidentally use a phrase or a word that violates a fair housing rule, then that's an ad that gets everybody in trouble. We'll learn about that stuff more specifically later, but that's what the broker in charge is doing. Every office location has to have a BIC, every one. So if it's it's a firm that has 3 locations, there's got to be a BIC for each one. Is there a limit to how many provisional brokers a broker in charge is responsible for? Not currently. And there are some firms with like a couple of hundred of them. I would not want to be BIC over a couple of hundred provisional brokers. There's a lot of BICs that don't want to be BICs over any provisional brokers, but no offense. But I mean, good grief, where is the limit? I have to believe that at some point the Real Estate Commission might say, okay, we found that point. It just seems bad, like just a bad idea for someone to be in charge of a certain number. I think part of the reason that there's no limit is that a lot of times you have teams of multiple people. A lot of firms have like teams of 5, 10, 15 people. And so there's a team leader who has hired provisional brokers to basically assign buyers to and be buyer agents for them. So they kind of have their own leader person as well as the BIC of the actual firm. So that might at least keep them in check, keep them under control. But ultimately, the actual BIC of that location is ultimately responsible. We know that provisional status is temporary for 18 months. We know that it's these courses that have to be taken. And if you don't take the courses, you will become an inactive broker. And we went through this part already too. Okay, this weird animal here. Limited non-resident commercial broker's license. So there are about 270 of these in North Carolina. What is it about? It's not residential. You don't do this when you're selling residential real estate. You don't need this kind of license if you're in residential. It's not a thing for residential. It's only for commercial. And the idea is if someone is in another state, licensed in another state, properly and actively licensed, wherever, let's just say Virginia, what if they want to come here because they work for a company that wants to expand into North Carolina, and that company wants to send their real estate professional that they have on staff here to this state to help them find their new location they're expanding to? Well, rather than find a North Carolina broker to work with, they could send their person here. And as long as it's for commercial purposes and they are not a resident of North Carolina in any way, meaning they don't have a phone number or address for either residentially or business-wise, they cannot be a North Carolina person in either one of those areas, living here or work here. Non-resident, for commercial purposes, they can come here and do real estate without a North Carolina license. They have to have a license from whatever state they came from, but they don't have to have a North Carolina one. And it's only, again, for commercial. How is that possible? Doesn't that seem kind of foolish? Don't you think commercial is super complex? Are we opening ourselves up to trouble if somebody comes here without a North Carolina license, without learning the laws and rules and does real estate? Yeah. And so North Carolina Real Estate Commission says, so we'll allow it, but only if they have a brokerage cooperation agreement with an actual North Carolina broker, because that broker is going to be responsible for this person. Notice it says an agreement with a North Carolina broker. It doesn't say broker in charge. That's an easy one to miss on the test question. In other words, that out-of-state commercial broker coming here to do real estate in North Carolina without a North Carolina license, they're allowed to do it if they get this thing called a limited non-resident commercial broker's license. And the person that's going to be over them or kind of help them know the laws and rules, that brokerage cooperation agreement they're going to have with a North Carolina broker, that doesn't have to be a broker in charge person. It can just be a plain old broker, right? It couldn't be a provisional, by the way. It would need to be a non-provisional full broker. Doesn't have to be a broker in charge, although they are sort of in charge, or at least overseeing the actions of this out-of-state person to make sure they don't break North Carolina rules. Does that make sense? Sort of a weird unicorn of a license type. And again, out of 84,000 human licenses, only 270 or 80 of them are this thing. And that's about it that they ask you to know about this particular item. Firm license is when you set up your own company, you might choose to operate it as an LLC, a limited liability company. You might have a partner, and so therefore you want to set up an LLP, limited liability partnership. You might choose through the advice of your tax preparer / CPA accountant. They might give you advice, well, based on the amount of production and income that you make, because you're such a big shot making a bunch of income, I think, your tax person is telling you this, I think you should set up a C corporation, or I think you should set up an S corporation. That is not for me to give you advice on. That is for your CPA to tell you, yeah, okay, you do this much income, you probably need to set it up into this entity structure. But all four of those are types of what we call entities, non-humans, but basically a corporation. LLP, LLC, S Corp, C Corp. You could pick any of those things. How do you do that? You could all do it right now, literally. If you want to pay the money, you could go to the North Carolina Secretary of State website. You could do a name search, check to be sure the name you want to pick and use for your purposes is not already being used, so there's no confusion. And you would pay them some amount of money. If it's an LLC that you're setting up, which is something I've done, that's why I know this, I think it's like $100 or maybe $150. You could, of course, have an attorney do this for you, and they're going to make it a little more involved, give you more resources, more information, and actually do it for you. But you could do it yourself on the Secretary of State website for North Carolina. You could even pay them an extra $50 and they would approve it quicker and tell you like in 6 hours instead of like, yeah, sorry, in the chat. If that's not the right page on the syllabus, forgive me. I need to update that because they did update the syllabus this year. So you could get that approval faster than a day or two, even a matter of hours. Once you've become and set up that entity, now you need to tell the North Carolina Real Estate Commission, hey, I'm not going to do my business in the name of Joseph, my human name. I'm going to do it in the name of Hey Joe Incorporated. That's my entity name. The commission needs to know how you're operating. And they care that you're doing real estate in the name of this LLC or this corporation and incorporated, whatever it is you do. And so you got to make sure they know this. And so they're going to require that you get what's called a firm license. Since you've set up an entity, that means that now your broker in charge is not going to write the check out to Joseph. He's going to write the check out at Joseph's instruction. I want you to pay me through my entity. I want you to pay Hey Joe Incorporated. Write the check out to that name. the name of my little corporation / LLC business that I've created. So the commission says that's fine. You're doing real estate for another person for compensation in the name of your entity instead of your human name. You've told us, we have it on record. We were aware of it. But since your entity is doing real estate for another person for compensation, it needs its own real estate license too. So in that case, Joe's going to have to pay $45 to renew his Joseph Human license and his Hey Joe Incorporated license every year. That's what I do. I pay for my Neil Pender license and I pay for my Impact Carolinas Realty license. $45 to renew both of them. So that's what we mean by a firm license. You're operating in the name of an entity. Why do you do that? Why would people care about an entity? Tell me that in the chat, or if you want to speak up. What's the purpose of setting up an LLC and getting paid in the name of that instead of your human name? You got it. Tax benefits, tax deductions, also liability protection. Because I don't own my house in the name of my firm. My firm doesn't own my house. Neil, the human, owns the house. So if somebody sues Neil's firm, they can't touch the house, theoretically. Now, there's attorneys that might have different opinions about reach and blah, 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 but we're going with that for this course right now. So that's the reason. It's really the tax benefits and protections. And so a firm license is required. And it just so happens 84,000 human licenses that I've told you about a couple times, about 17,000 firm licenses. Each of those firm licenses is tied to a human, right? Because when you set up a firm, you have to declare something called a qualifying broker. Qualifying broker, a QB. That's the human that the firm is attached to. That's the human that has to keep their license active so that the firm's license remains active. It has to make sure that they renew the firm's license. That's the human responsible for that firm. And that QB, qualifying broker, who set up that firm with the real estate commission, they assign and appoint a broker in charge for the firm as well. So there's a QB and there's a BIC, qualifying broker who created this thing, and a broker in charge who is in charge of whoever's in the firm. So in my case, I don't have anybody, no associated brokers under me. The only person I need to have in charge of is myself. But I am my own QB because I started the firm, and I am my own BIC. And there's a lot of them like that. I bet out of those 17,000 firm licenses, a vast majority are single owner, single person firms because of the tax benefits. There are even some of those entities that have been created, and it's not even that the agent who did it wanted to go out and hang their own shingle, so to speak, or have their own little ABC Realty firm. They're happy where they are. They're at Coldwell Banker or Keller Williams, Remax, whatever, but they have an entity set up while under and within that firm because, again, their BIC, their broker in charge of that Remax office they work for, they cut the check out to that little entity they created because of the tax protection, because of the liability protection. And that's allowed. The commission says, yeah, that makes sense. You can do that. When you have that situation, all you want your entity for is to get paid in the name of it for the tax benefits. You don't even need a BIC. You don't need to assign and name a BIC if it's a little corporation entity within a big firm or some kind of firm, doesn't have to be big, that you work for, because you already have a BIC, the one of the firm you're in. So you kind of see that little nuance. That's how this firm stuff applies. So that's a second license required for having an entity. Since you're doing all the things in the name of this entity you've created, you're listing property, you're representing people selling and buying, you're handling leases maybe, doing property management, you're maybe conducting auctions. You might even just be referring people to another agent in another state and getting paid a referral fee. Let's talk about that for a second. Can you, right now, since you know an agent who's got an active license, that's me, could each one of you send me a referral and say, hey, my cousin wants to buy something in Charlotte. Can you help them? Can you send them to me? I help the person buy something. I get paid a commission on that. If all that happens, can I pay you for having sent them to me? That would be called a referral fee. I've paid you a referral fee because you sent me a piece of business that closed. Am I allowed to pay you right now, today, in your current status? Why not? Do you have what you need? What is it that you don't have that keeps me from being allowed to pay you a referral fee? What's that thing you're trying to get in 10 weeks after you take that PSI? The license. You've got to have a license even to get the referral fee. And I'll bet that's being done improperly, illegally all the time. One time I had a person call me about one of my listings, and he said, "Hey, tell me more about your listing." And I gave him the bedrooms and square feet and blah, blah, blah. And I said, because the natural question when they call you is to find out if they're a lead, a potential buyer. And I said, you been looking around for a while? And he's like, yeah. So have you been pre-approved or whatever? I asked him. Well, it's not me that's buying it. Oh, I'm thinking, okay, so it's an agent. And I said, oh, you're working with a buyer that likes this? Well, no, I'm not an agent either. I'm like, okay, I'm running out of options here. Come to find out, he says, well, I help an investor who's looking to buy property, and I just try to find opportunities for him and then hand them off once I've located a potential good property that investor might want to buy. In the investment world, it might be called a bird dog. Somebody who's looking for opportunities. Now, if this guy that called me then called his investor buddy and said, yeah, sounds like a good one. Here's a potential for you. And that investor paid him a referral fee. And this guy's not actually licensed. And I know he wasn't because I asked him. I said, are you a real estate agent? And he said, no. And I eventually realized what he was doing. And I said, just so you know, it's not like I'm going to turn you in or anything, but just so you know, if you're getting paid a referral fee for finding deals for somebody, that's illegal. And the real estate commission can come after you and pursue something called injunctive relief. Injunctive relief. They'd go to the attorney general and say, hey, we got word that this person out here is doing real estate without a license. We want to sue them because we got to stop that stuff. Because why? Why do they care that somebody's doing real estate without a license? Why does the real estate commission care about that? Who could it hurt? You got it. The only thing they care about is the consumer. And you better believe it could hurt a consumer if somebody's out there doing the things that we do in real estate without the license, law, and commission rules knowledge, right? The protections built in. Could be very predatory, right? They could be looking out for their own bottom line instead of the benefit of the consumer. So that's what happens. That's another thing the real estate commission has the power to do is pursue somebody for injunctive relief to keep them out of our business. We want to keep the unlicensed out of doing real estate duties and tasks that require the license because it could hurt the consumer. So all of these things, including receiving a referral fee, are activities that require a license. And that referral fee thing is very underappreciated, I think. Before I go further there, I even had a CE student one time, taught a CE update class, and he was an older guy. He had just retired from whatever his 30-year career was. And he had a license for a couple of years and made decent money, but never showed any property to anybody and never listed a house for sale. And how did he make money if he's never shown houses and never listed houses for sale? All he's done for the last, at that point, 3 or 4 years was receive referral fees. Because what he did as soon as he got his license was he dropped, now I'm not saying you would do it this way. There's other better ways to do what he did. He went old school. He spent about 20 grand on TV and radio ads and got the phone ringing with interested leads. And then he referred each of those leads out to the other agents in his office. He didn't want to show houses on Sunday morning. He didn't want to list a house at 8 o'clock at night on Thursday, but he got paid because he handed off the lead that he found that raised their hand and called him and came to him because of the money he spent. He basically became a little Zillow, except it wasn't with website stuff. It was with old school advertising. You could do the similar kind of thing, but use social media ads, Facebook ads, YouTube channel, whatever you do to generate leads. You don't have to work that lead. You can refer it out to somebody that wants to work it. And then all you might refer it out for like 30% of the commission. And then you forget you did it. And 6 months later, here comes this check you forgot you earned. Pretty cool when you have a bunch of them kind of streaming in. So that's a possibility. Let's see, chat question. Can a broker charge a regular person a fee for referring them to another? What do you mean, a broker charge a regular? Do you mean pay a regular person a fee? You mean her ask you to pay her for hooking you up with a North Carolina broker? It wouldn't go that way. She could, though, get that North Carolina broker to pay her a referral fee for having connected you to her. And then since she's your cousin and you love each other and she wants your best interest, she doesn't really want the fee. She just wants to make sure that she approves of the agent that you're working for here. That's really what really happens more. She could tell this North Carolina broker, look, the reason I want you to work with her is because I want her to be taken care of. Don't even pay me the fee. Just give her the commission instead. In other words, they could give you a rebate. So there's a little wrinkle, a little nuance that you could do there. Instead of this North Carolina broker paying your cousin and then your cousin giving that money to you, what's the problem with that? Well, they have to pay income tax on that referral fee. Other than that, she could say to that North Carolina broker, just charge her less than you normally would, right? Instead of giving me a fee, charge her less, right? So when you're a buyer agent for helping a buyer, that's between you and your buyer. And if you're going to make a commission when you help them buy something, you could rebate money to your buyer client. That's not the same as a referral fee. That's you deciding to give some of your money to your client. And there have been agents out there in the world that have said, hey, world, on a billboard, I've even seen it on a billboard, I will rebate you 1% of the buyer agency commission. If you let me help you buy, I'll give you some of what I earn. It's possible. It's legal. Do you want to do it? It's a business decision. And it might be a way that you get some attention from buyers that other agents don't. Now, there is something to be said for being what's considered the term discount broker is sort of a bad word. You're not allowed. The commission doesn't want us to say the word discount broker. It implies that there's a standard commission rate, which we're also not allowed to say. So what is it discounted from? There would be a standard from which it is. So we got to say a limited service broker, somebody that's more free and willing to charge more creatively less, I guess. So there are some elements there that you have to be careful about. But yeah, that'd be a way that you could handle that without the referral fee. Let's see, taking notes on syllabus, line item. Great question. Jara says, do we need to know the terribly long and annoying license law or commission rule number? No. Thank goodness they will never say, hey, what does 93A-3 say? Nope. All you need to know is the gist of it. They will never ask you to identify. They might reference it, but they won't just say, tell me about 93A-3. They'll say, in Rule 93A-3, which talks about whatever it talks about, here are the facts, and then ask you for the right answer there. Good question. Okay, let's get into this one. Activities that don't require a license. You can do real estate without a license. What? We just spent 30 minutes of you beating us over the head saying that you can't. Yeah, I know, but there's always exceptions. Here are the exceptions. Oops, sorry, I'm getting off track here. Let me, that's going to be in a minute. Reset. Here's what the tasks, the actual tasks you can do that don't require the license. So that might mean that you could hire somebody without a license to do some of this stuff for you. Once you get to a certain point of being busy, you don't need to be putting that listing into the MLS yourself. You don't need to sit in front of a computer and say, okay, 3,400 square feet. Here's the address. Here's the bedrooms. Let me write out a paragraph. Your hour that it would take you to do all that, uploading photos and all that stuff, that's very clerical. And that's great and fine for you to do when you have no choice. In the beginning, I still do it, but that's still an hour that you could be trying to find another lead. And so you're going to get to the point where you need to maximize your time as efficiently as you can. You've got a chunk of money that you can hire out and delegate. That's sort of like $10, $15, $20 an hour type work. And you want to get to the point where that's beneath your earning level. What are you worth? Well, when you sell a few houses and you do the math, I spent 40 hours on this transaction and I got paid $20,000. What is that? $20,000 divided by 40 hours. That's $500 an hour. There are attorneys that would love to make that. Now, yeah, you have expenses in the mix, but still, should you be running an ad? Should you be entering things in the MLS if you are consistently selling 3 or 4 houses a month at $500 an hour when you really do the math? Probably not. Go find more people to do that for. Hire somebody else to do this stuff. So here's the stuff you can hire unlicensed people to do. Put it in the MLS. Be a courier. When you get that listing, you need to take the sign out there, put it in the yard, put the lockbox on the door. You don't have to do that. Someone with a license does not have to do that. I said that part. Provide basic info. If someone calls in on an ad you ran and said, hey, what's the price on ABC Street? You don't have to have a license to answer that question. You could say, oh, let me read it off of the data sheet here. It's $330,000. That is okay for an unlicensed person to do. If the follow-up question is, yeah, but would they take $315,000? Now they're out of their depth. Now they need to refer the questioner, the person calling in, to you, someone with a broker license. But yes, they can provide basic property info while not having a license. They also can schedule appointments, coordinate appointments. Oh, you want to show my listing at Thursday at 3 p.m.? Great. Let me call the seller, see if that's okay. I'll call the showing agent back and tell them, yep, that'll work. So an unlicensed person can do that stuff. There's a whole team, just so happens, at least in our market, and I bet it's pretty universal at this point. But our MLS here in Charlotte is called Canopy, and the Canopy MLS has a partnership with a company called Showing Time, or showings.com, I think. And they've hired a whole bunch of people who sit by the phone all day and answer phone requests or email online website requests for showings for properties. And so it's built into how much you pay your MLS for us. There's a team of phone operators that set up these showings. So that they don't have licenses. They don't need to have licenses. All they're doing is scheduling and coordinating appointments. Preparing pre-printed forms, but don't stop there. For who? An unlicensed person can fill in the blanks of a pre-printed form as long as they're doing it for their boss or for a licensee. In other words, they can't do it for the consumer and explain the terms of this offer or contract to the consumer directly. The unlicensed person is not allowed to say, hey, consumer, you want to offer this? Well, I think you should offer that instead. And I'll fill in the blanks for you. No. They can do all that. They can fill the blanks in. So I could show property for all day long, 10 properties to somebody. I could call an assistant that I don't have, but if I had an unlicensed assistant, I could call them and say, hey, headed back to the office. We're going to meet in the conference room. Go ahead and fill in the blanks so that I have that paperwork mostly done and I can show it to the client once we get there. Because It doesn't need to be me that writes in the address, that writes the tax ID number, the legal description, even the offer price. Hey, write it up for $325 with $5,000 being paid by the seller and a home warranty included and a closing date of November 30th. All that stuff can be done by an unlicensed assistant. As long as they're doing it, filling in those blanks for you, the one with the license. Showing rental property. Oh, wait a minute. Showing property. Can an unlicensed person show property? It depends. If it's property for sale, no. You can't show properties that are for sale if you don't have a real estate license. Why? Because there's too much of a chance the conversation will come up asking things that you aren't qualified to give advice on. Anything negotiating wise, for instance. But you can, without a license, show rental property. That's a big testable item. Can an unlicensed person show property that's for rent? Yes. Can an unlicensed person show a property that's for sale? No. How many of you go around to open houses from time to time just to see them, just for fun? Or maybe because you were in the market to buy. Anybody go to open houses? And there's a person in there with the cookies and the hot chocolate or whatever, and they might stick to you like glue, which is the wrong thing to do. Or they might say, go on through and let me know if you have questions. Whatever it is, that person, if they're all by themselves, they better have a license because you're essentially showing real estate for sale. If your unlicensed assistant wants to hold an open house, they can be there with you, but a broker has to be there too, right? Got to have a broker for open houses, a licensed person. But if it's a rental, then you don't. I think the logic there is there's much less of a chance that a rental property showing is going to be a question like a negotiation kind of question. Hey, they're going to rent for $2,300 a month. Would they take $2,000? That's less likely to happen than it is when it's a for sale property. And then executing, oh boy, there's a big scary word. Executing pre-printed leases for an employer. There's a lot packed in here. Like 4 major terms in here. First of all, the word executing. That's like making it a thing, signing it, making it an actual document that binds people. So executing is not the same as preparing. Preparing means you filled in the blanks. Somebody else is going to sign the bottom line. Executing means you're signing the bottom line on behalf of who? Your employer. What is this talking about? A W-2 paid, salaried, unlicensed person working for a property manager. Because it's leases we're talking about. So as a W-2 salaried property management, basically assistant or employee, you can do real estate that usually would require a license. You can do some tasks that require a license, but you don't need one because you're doing property management for someone you work for who's paying you a salaried W-2, not 1099, not a commission. And again, pre-printed, we can't create language. We can't make legal language, much as we might think we're qualified to because we watch crime, Law and Order, and there's law shows. You can't write it from scratch in a Word document. And that's the case for all licensees too. A big one that we'll see in the comments section is you can't give legal advice, and you can't do things an attorney is allowed to do without a legal or law license. So as a broker, as a real estate broker, if our client said, hey, I want to add something to my offer. I want to create an addendum A to add to the offer, which says, hey, seller, if you're getting multiple offers and one of those offers, whatever the highest offer is, I will go ahead and tell you now, I'll beat it by $3,000 up to a maximum price of $750. That is a real literal thing. And it's called an escalation clause. Anybody heard of an escalation clause? It's not something that's a pre-printed form that we have access to, but it is a thing, an occurrence that happens out there in the market sometimes. It's not something that our North Carolina Real Estate Commission even advises or likes. The problem with an escalation clause is it could result in disclosing the person who's made the highest offer that's on the table, and that's not allowed without that person's permission. So it gets into some gray legal area. But the point here is, if your client asks you to write something like that, I can't do it. I'd have to say, I'm not allowed to write something and create it from scratch. Two choices there. What are their choices if your client wants you to write a whole new fresh document from scratch? Who can write it? What kind of person could write and make a legal document? By far the best option is an attorney. But the other possible person that could write an extra add-on to a contract, or even the contract itself, is one of the parties that are in the contract. Either the buyer or the seller themselves could write that addendum they want you to include. And you could tell them that, look, I can't write it, but you can. If you want to write it and email it to me and put a blank in there so we can give a place for you to sign it, fine. But I can't write anything from scratch myself. Or better yet, I'd rather you not even do it yourself, client. Let's have an attorney write it, because you might think, that client might think, all we need is one little sentence. But really, from a legal perspective, that sentence triggers a whole list of other possibilities and consequences. And that's why attorneys do what they do, because that one sentence they think they want might need to actually be 2 pages to account for all the possible things that one little sentence unleashes potentially, right? Just the way law stuff works, isn't it? Thankfully, we can bow out of it altogether. And I've said that very joyfully many times. Somebody comes up with some extra thing they want me to do, and I say, oh, sorry, not allowed to. Can't give you legal advice. Can't make a contract or an addendum for you. Let's talk about this one. Who are the real estate commissioners? The people that are actually on the real estate commission. Let's actually see them and their lovely faces. If we go to the real estate commission website, there we go. We go to commission members. There they are. Actual people. And there are 9 of them. There are 9 people on the real estate commission board. These 9 people are the ones that decide when changes need to be made. Like back during COVID, they took a vote and decided, hey, what are we going to do about this whole infectious disease thing we got going on here? Are we really going to let people sit in classrooms together, but they still want to get their license? And so they made a decision to allow people to do stuff without being in person, let the Zoom thing kick in. They actually, on that year 2020, they decided instead of June 10th to renew or to have your CE done, to bump it all the way to the following October. So that was their decision to make, because they are basically governing and in charge of the real estate industry. Now, the people on this board have to be comprised of certain elements. This board has to have at least 3 people who are actively in real estate. That probably makes sense to you. If we want a real estate commission giving advice and being in charge of other agents, let's make sure that some of them actually know what it's like to be in real estate. So at least 3 of them must be active in real estate. And look here, Jeff is not. He's an attorney. So he's one of the ones that we have to have that's not in real estate, because the board also needs to have a balance. And they say at least 2 people on the board of 9 must not be involved in real estate. Usually they are attorneys instead of agents. In this case, Jeff's an attorney. Mr. Lindsay is a broker, so he's one of the 3 minimum. Mel Black is an attorney. So we've got 2 attorneys. We've got another real estate guy. He's a new member, Mr. Aceto. So we got 2 and 2 so far. Wendell, Mr. Bullard, is a broker. We got 3 brokers versus 2 attorneys. Here's a law firm, and now we're back to 3 and 3. And then Miss Millette, another attorney. We're 4 and 3. Miss O'Connor's an agent, 4 and 4. And so we have 1 more attorney than we do actual agent or licensee on the board right now. But they have to have at least 2 non-brokers and at least 3 brokers. And that's them. Now, when these guys decide to carry out some new order, some new rule, who actually puts it into place? In other words, does Jeff or Anthony make up the questions on the PSI exam? Heck no. They have other things to do. Someone else does that because there are about 60 employees in the building. Up there in Raleigh on Navajo Trail, 60 employees. Some of them are the ones carrying out the wishes of these guys. The second floor are the regulators and attorneys who are answering legal questions. When people say, hey, is it illegal for me to sell my meth house in the middle of the marijuana field? Well, yeah, kind of. They'll give you that legal advice as to that sort of situation. So, where are we? There we go. 9 members total. They serve 3-year terms. 7 of those 9 members, these are all testable bullet points here. 7 of those 9 commissioners are appointed by whoever the governor is in the moment. So just this year, one of the commissioners was done and is off the board now because she served her 3-year term. Her name was Cindy Chandler. She's a commercial broker. She's been an educator, teacher forever and ever, but she also recently served on the Real Estate Commission. She was also special to me because she was my pre-licensing instructor in 1996. And so she served on the board the Real Estate Commission. She just finished. And so I think that guy named Aceto took her place. So if she was appointed by the governor back when she joined the commission, then the governor would now need to find her replacement. But not all 9 are appointed by the governor, as you see here. One of them is appointed by the North Carolina Speaker. Another one is appointed by the North Carolina Senate. And so if it was the one that was appointed by the Speaker and she was one of them, then it would be the Speaker that now needs to assign her replacement. Notice here it says appointed. The 9 people on the commission are not voted in. They're given the position. They're appointed. Do you think they get money? Do you think they get paid for being on the Real Estate Commission? They do not. They do get a travel and a hotel, whatever. But they don't. They just serve for the sake of the business, for the sake of the industry. And so 2 days out of the month, every month, they meet. Back in the day when we couldn't meet together, they met via Zoom. Now they meet in person. The meetings are available via Zoom, so you could actually sit in and watch a meeting. You can actually go in person and watch one if a lot of you are in Raleigh. It might be a good thing to do at some point along the way, not necessarily during the class now, but maybe sometime in the next year, go see what an actual commission meeting looks like. What does it look like when they discuss things that affect our industry? There's a lot of things affecting our industry right now. There's a big lawsuit, I think I mentioned maybe yesterday, that's going to change how we do commissions, quite likely. Right now, the seller pays a commission to their listing agent, and that agent shares it with the buyer's agent. But the results of this lawsuit could turn out that the seller's not allowed to pay the buyer agent. Only the seller pays just their own agent, the listing agent, and then the buyer has to pay their own buyer agent separately. That could be the result. It might be years down the road because whatever these lawsuits turn into will be appealed. And then it could be something that just drags out for a long time. But we're already seeing there's already been 2, maybe 3 companies. RE/MAX is one of them. RE/MAX settled. They got sued in this big lawsuit. They settled for $55 million. And a bigger company than that settled for $83 million. And so RE/MAX has already said, hey, we are going to allow sellers to pay $0 to a buyer agent if they want to. We'll get into all that when we talk about agency. But point is, whoever appointed somebody, if that's the person that's now off the Real Estate Commission, they need to appoint a replacement. And then, again, we said this, at least 3 must be licensed brokers and at least 2 can't be in real estate at all. That's what you need to know about the real estate commissioners. Let's come back from break and we'll talk about what does that commission do? What sorts of things do the real estate commissioners do? I'll see you back here in 10. Welcome back. Welcome back. Okay. There we go. Okay. So what do these people on this real estate commission do? They, of course, protect the public, the consumer. They also make sure that we educators, teachers in this business, teach the right stuff. They have a lot to say about that. In fact, that continuing education update course that we have to take every year, they make the course, they create the content, they train us. So in October of every year, somebody, one of those workers, not one of the commissioners, but one of the 60 employees, puts together a list of potential topics and turns that into a 4-hour course, the 4-hour the 4-hour continuing ed update. And then all of us who want to teach it to you when you become licensee sit through an 8-hour course on how to teach that 4-hour course every year. So they tell us exactly what to teach for that particular one. For the pre and post licensing courses, the syllabus is what we need to create our courses and our teaching and kind of pattern after. And that's why we pretty much just say, you know what, we're going to go page by page, line by line from the syllabus and tell you what you need to know from top to bottom. It just so happens that a couple of the different possible textbooks we are allowed to use that have to be approved by the commission, the Dearborn one is the one you're using. Some of them are in order, same order of the syllabus. One of the new ones from another publisher does that, but the Dearborn one's been around forever. Very good one. I like this book. It's just that we saw yesterday there's a couple of little diversions. So you might have chapter 20 versus syllabus, whatever. So that's just a little annoyance, but still good content. But the commission is the one who had to approve that textbook. So they handle issuing licenses for firm licenses and human broker licenses. They also require that timeshare projects be registered. What does that mean? Has anybody sat through a timeshare sales pitch? Hold up your hands. Anybody gone through? Did you like the thing you did it for? You did it to get the toaster, or you did it to get the free night or two or the weekend, right? Was that part good? You just had to sit through a 5-hour sales pitch, didn't you? Did you sign up? Did you buy it? Anybody buy it? I rarely see that. Yes. A lot of people are like, just give me the free thing. But they do put you through your paces. You got to listen to all that stuff, don't you? Well, in North Carolina, they do timeshares also. And those timeshare projects have to be registered with the Real Estate Commission. Yeah, sorry, you guys aren't seeing it. But yeah, Danielle, ignore that page number. I need to correct that because the syllabus changed this year. We are actually in the syllabus on, it's exactly page 107. 106, 107, somewhere in there. What else? Oh, so what is a timeshare? we're going to talk about that in like chapter 1 or 2, but it's essentially, instead of a deed to own the property, a deed that says, hey, I own this property, it's permission to occupy the property for an amount of time, just like the title says, on a regular basis. And there's a formula, there's some guidelines. I'll tell you what 555 10 means. That kind of helps you remember the basics of the timeshare stuff. But that timeshare project has to be registered and overseen, or officially registered with the Real Estate Commission. The commission also establishes the education requirement. The commission investigates complaints. That's the big scary one. Let me show you what that looks like. If we go back to here, to publications and bulletins, this is the bulletin that all of us who pay, well, I guess it's available to the public too, but we get it in our email every month. And it used to be printed, but now it's email, electronic, which is cool. And so it's got the commission members. We go down through, we can see a couple articles that might be applicable for recent stuff. If we go down here, though, for one thing, we can see the latest count. And we can see that total licenses are 121,000. That includes firms. Oh, it looks like I was off. Boy, it really was 279 limited non-resident commercial brokers like 6 months ago. Now they're up to 218. And it's about 16,411 for firm licenses. As far as active broker licenses, down here, the full brokers, 75,800, plus another 46 for the provisionals. So what is that, 79, about 80? Oh, we're light a little bit. So that's just the count, and it doesn't really matter. It's just something to talk about. Here's the main thing that people look at in this bulletin. They go straight down to the disciplinary actions. Take a look. They are calling out this licensee. The Real Estate Commission prints this, and this is Googleable. In other words, if somebody does a Google search for this person's name, this entry showing his disciplinary action is going to show up on some page on Google. So they add public shaming to the disciplinary process. Let's see what he did. Right there in Durham, this person was permanently revoked. Holy cow. We'll see in just a minute. That's the worst thing that can happen. You're losing your license for probably forever. You can't do this business anymore. Revoked. Another one that we'll see is reprimand. That's the lightest, almost the lightest. You could be warned, but a reprimand is the lightest of one of the four. Reprimand, censure, which is sort of like a reprimand. Suspension, hey, take a break for a minute. You need to think about what you did, or maybe take a course to get refreshed on something. And then this big, bad, worst one, revocation. So what did he do? He was the qualifying broker and broker in charge of his LLC real estate firm. He purchased a home and completed renovations, meaning intending to flip the property, meaning he just wanted to buy it, fix it up, and then sell it pretty quickly. He did not hire a licensed general contractor. He did not get a certificate of occupancy or permits for the renovations. He failed to disclose that he didn't have those permits prior to the time of offer. The buyer learned there was no certificate of occupancy. That's basically the official city or county provided document that says this place is habitable, is safe to live in. You can't sell a property until you have a CO. Power company would not connect power because it didn't pass inspection. Whatever electrical work had been done wasn't good enough to get the CO, and because it had no CO, the power company said, we're not starting power to this place. It probably burned down. Several contract extensions happened, were agreed to by the buyer, but the broker failed to get the permits and the CO, failed to complete, some courses. He was supposed to take a broker in charge update course. That's what BICUP means, broker in charge update. You're going to be taking a general update, a gen up course once you first get your license. If you never become a BIC, you'll never have to take the BICUP. It's just the update version for brokers. He didn't take his CE. That's essentially what that is. And was removed as broker in charge of his LLC, left the firm without a broker in charge. So because he didn't do his CE course, now he's inactive. And so therefore his firm had no BIC. He failed to respond to 3 letters of inquiry from the commission. Guys, this is what made it the worst for him. All that stuff was bad enough. But when you don't pay attention, when you ignore their request for information, that ticks them off, frankly. And it gets way worse. 3, every time they send a letter of inquiry, you have 14 days to reply and give whatever it is they're asking for. They probably said, we need to see your files. We need to see the contract. We need to see the certificate of occupancy or your communication via email and texting. And he didn't even answer any of them. So that's probably what made it go straight to revoked. I've seen cases where the people did some pretty crazy and bad stuff, but they still got to keep their license. They only got suspended. And it's because they were remorseful. They said, okay, here's what I did. I'm sorry. What can I do to fix it? I want to stay in it. How you handle this investigation matters in a huge way as to your outcome. And so because he himself got the revocation, his little LLC, it could have been a big one. I don't know how big his firm was. It also was revoked. So that's all that means. This next person, I don't like these because you don't find out what happened, but the firm accepted a voluntary surrender. In other words, he said, you know what, guys, here's my license. I won't do this anymore. But when they do that, they neither admit nor deny. And so they don't give you the details of what happened there. If we keep going, another voluntary surrender, I wonder if they were different towns. So I was kind of wondering if they were related. This one was just a reprimand. If you're going to be disciplined by the commission, that's what you want. I mean, the easiest, best one is just a warning. But this is the first easiest official thing. And so they reprimanded her because she acted as a broker in charge and qualifying broker, but she didn't adequately supervise the firm's COO. They used a company credit card for personal use and misappropriated or misapplied $306,000 in funds from the client trust account. They spent other people's money. Yeah, that's some good stuff in the chat. That pretty much, no surprise. But are you surprised at this now knowing the level of the money? I kind of am, but it goes back to she must have behaved properly and showed some remorse and said, hey, what can I do? I'm so sorry. I'll fix it. I'll do better. So that's what I mean, guys. I mean, that sounds pretty intense. And I'll bet if we didn't see the reprimand first, if we just saw the offense and we all took a vote together and said, what do we think they did to her? I bet this wouldn't be it. I would have probably said at least a suspension, right? Let's see, another reprimand. Oh, that's the same thing related to the same case. Reprimanded. Nope, different person here. Commission reprimanded this person because they represented a buyer and failed to disclose that there might be a bypass by the North Carolina DOT. Disclosure. The thing that got this agent in trouble was they failed to disclose because, as we'll see in very soon, we are required to disclose material facts about a property. Not only the material facts about it, but material facts that we have an expectation as professionals in this business of being able to discover. And apparently she did not disclose that there was a possible extra big road being planned in the area that affected this property. Here's a suspension. We see these more. Usually we see the suspensions quite a bit. And this person, let's see, it says they were suspended for 12 months, but the commission stayed the suspension after 1 month based upon certain conditions. What does that mean? If he took some classes, then he only needs to sit the bench for 1 month of the 12. But if he screws up and takes too long and doesn't finish the class, then he's going to have to be suspended and not do real estate for 12 months. So we see a lot of staying of a suspension or suspending the suspension. I see names that I recognize in here almost half the time. The commission found that this person listed a subject property for sale, attached an expired septic permit. When you have a property that handles their wastewater with a septic tank, you've got to show how many bedrooms the property is, the septic system is capable of handling. Potential buyers terminated the contract, notified Cloninger that it was due in part to the difficulty of getting a septic permit. He relisted it, failed to disclose the permit again. Another buyer went under contract, learned that a conventional septic system may not be possible. If you can't put a conventional septic system in, you're going to have to do a fancier one that's going to cost more money. And they terminated the contract. He listed the property a third time and still didn't disclose the information. Subsequent buyer again terminated because he never fixed it. He just kept listing the property and never handled the septic issue. And look, they suspended him. So yeah, it's pretty crazy. If we go back to August, we won't go through all of them, but we've got a revoke, a surrender, a surrender. Oh, is that the same one? Yeah, it's the same one. Sorry. Oh, here we go. That's what it was. Past issues. That's what I wanted. So a lot of times we see that suspending the suspension. And yeah, it's good to watch those. It's good to keep it on top of what people are doing wrong so that you don't do it wrong. All right, we'll keep going. Since I teach the update course, I see what the commission wants us to tell everybody every year. And in the last couple of years, the main area for disciplinary action against brokers was because of material facts not being disclosed properly, as we just saw. And so we're going to learn about that in a little bit. The next batch of license law and commission rules, page 5 through 9 or so, we're going to talk about and learn about disclosing material facts and how you can get in trouble for that. You might see dog faces in the background of my video now that they're bothering me. So yeah, that's what the commission does. Here are the 4 things we already kind of touched on. They could either reprimand, censure, suspend, or revoke. Here's the big testable item. Pause for you to hear what I just said. Testable item. What does the real estate commission not do to us? There's something that we won't ever have to deal with the real estate commission. And what is that? They could suspend, revoke, censure, but they don't fine us. Sorry, guys. I have to handle something real quick. There we go. So, yeah, the real estate commission does not fine licensees. That's another good one. Dima says they don't handle like money issues between brokers. That's true. But when they're disciplining us, they're not going to require us to pay a fine. We could be fined by other people, by other entities, like the Realtor Association. Because when we become licensees, we have the option to join the Realtor. It's a trade association. It's like the Teamsters or AARP, right? It's an association you pay to be a member of. They could fine you, or the MLS, Multiple Listing Service, could fine you because you maybe put something in the MLS listing for your listing description that was improper, maybe a fair housing violation, maybe some sort of a thing that triggers their robots that watch for those things. One second. All right. Just having to do a little bit of maintenance here. Misapply funds. Somebody asked in the chat, what was a way somebody could misapply funds? So we're going to talk about the trust account thing. When somebody gives us either a tenant security deposit in the case of a property management, or in a sale, earnest money showing how serious the buyer is about the offer they've made, the contract they have. it's got to sit somewhere. And it's either going to sit in a trust account that the firm has opened up with the bank or a trust account that the attorney that's going to close the property has. That firm or that attorney, whoever's in charge of the trust account, they can't put their own money in it. It's got to be only other people's money. And if they are taking money out of that trust account and spending it on their own use, that's a big no-no, obviously. So that'd be pretty much the misapplication of funds. Good point. Most of these are indeed avoidable by following the rules. There are some gray areas. Not really. I think a lot of these rule issues are because of laziness or because the person is in such a hurry to get paid, they take a shortcut. And that shortcut ends up being at the mercy of a rule, right? That gets broken. And because if I broke a rule right now, it's not like the real estate commission is at my door every minute saying, hey, you following the rules? They're only going to find out if they do a random spot audit, which could be a thing. They could show up to your firm and say, we just want to take a look at a few files. That could be something they do. Or because somebody made a complaint and now they need to investigate that complaint. So a lot of agents could be doing a lot of things wrong and being slack on their paperwork or keeping the files, and it doesn't matter until it does. It does matter. But they don't get caught until something like that takes place, right? Okay, I think I'm caught up there. So that's a big one. Now, I gave you this big bullet point that the Real Estate Commission does not fine licensees. We've got a few repeat attenders here in the class. Can somebody tell me in what exceptional case does the Real Estate Commission actually do? Do they actually fine us? The Real Estate Commission could fine us if we are a timeshare developer. Good job. They can fine a timeshare developer for violating the Timeshare Act, for not disclosing things required under the Timeshare Act, for instance. So that's the big exception. But besides that, yep, and if the amount Victor says is $500. Good job. Besides that, they're not going to fine you for failing to disclose a certificate of occupancy. They're going to do one of these 4 things. Okay. What's it take to get a license? You guys know that already because you're trying to do it. You're 18 at least. You have a Social Security number or U.S. citizen, qualified alien, work permit. You pass a course. Welcome. My dog messed up my green screen. Sorry, I got this allergy thing. So you're in the course now, and then you'll be taking the final exam for the course, which qualifies you to take the national and state exam called the PSI. And then along the way, as we mentioned yesterday, you'll have to get a background check. And by the way, when you get that done, when they're done and they're finished and they've checked all your states you've lived in, all your names you've been, they will send you the report by email. They'll also immediately send the Real Estate Commission the same thing. So the commission's going to have it on file. And then at that point, once you finally, at whatever point you take and pass the PSI, then the commission will look at the background report and make sure that they're cool with help ushering you in to join the business. So there's a requisite character study, in other words. Okay, we've talked about this already, but let's keep it straight in our minds. When you're a pre-licensee, you are that now. Or a provisional licensee, you will be that hopefully January, February. To become that, oh my goodness, hang on a second. All right. You will, you of course take this course we're doing now. Those boys. One more second. And then the 3 hours, the 330-hour post classes within 18 months. Once you've attained that, once you activate, from the moment you activate your license, pick a BIC, you've got to start taking CE classes. Every year you take 8 hours total continuing education. Now, as a brand new licensee, here's the exception for you. You get to skip your first June 10th deadline for CE. That's when your CE is due every year, is by June 10th. What is the CE composed of? 2 4-hour classes, the update one and the elective of your choice. Electives could be anything from mold to how to handle ethics complaints, or what sort of ethical considerations you need to watch out for, or artificial intelligence is part of some of the recent elective CE courses. It could be anything. Anything you want to sort of get a little specialized insight. There's a commercial real estate version. There's a property management CE elective courses. About anything you can dream of. I think like 600 of them there are to pick from across various schools. Different schools might offer their own specialized version. So one update that's a 4-hour course, and then one elective that's a 4-hour elective. That is called continuing education, CE. So when you're newly licensed, say in February, everything goes great. You pick a BIC, you've joined a firm, now you have an active provisional license. Over the next 18 months, you need to get your post done. The first June 10th that you're going to see is going to be June 10th of 2024. You don't need to do CE by this coming June 10th. You get to skip it because you know everything. You just learned it for 75 hours, for heaven's sake. Plus in that case, post-licensing too. But even just the pre-licensing class is enough to teach you basically everything that you would learn in the CE course. So they don't make you take CE before your first coming June 10th deadline. You won't have to take CE until June 10th of 2025 if you get actively licensed before this coming June 10th, right? Here's another important point, and it's a shame, but yeah, the last line of this slide, the post classes you take, all 90 hours, none of them count toward any of your CE requirement. They're totally separate. You're still going to have to take CE. You might still have some post-licensing to take because you might take longer. It might go until past, until into next year that you're still taking some post. But at that point next year, as of July 1st, next July 1st, you're going to have to, if you've activated your license, you're going to now have to take your CE next year as well. So the continuing ed happens every year for every broker. Due by June 10th. Due by June 10th. Due by June 10th. Oh, did he just have a stroke? Why is he saying that? Because I want you to write that down. Because your CE is due by June 10th every year. I ask this question to people in the CE class and they don't get it right. I don't know why. Here's the other deadline. Paying the dues. Your license can expire. Yep, test question. Good one. June 10th, CE deadline. Also, paying the $45 to renew your license, that's at June 30th. Because you should know this. The first day of the license year, the real estate license year, is July 1st. July 1st is when the licensing year begins. And so anytime you have a thing that begins and you got to pay money for it, you can pay all the way up to the day before. So you can pay the $45 all the way up to June 30th midnight, because on July 1st, the new license year begins. Other things about that important month of June and July. In June, on the 10th, is when you have to have your CE done. What if you forget? You forget to do your CE by June 10th. What happens on June 11th? You wake up on June 11th and you immediately realize, oh my gosh, I paid for the elective course. I just didn't hit the play button and watch it and complete it by midnight of last night. Here's the thing about it. Even people in CE get this wrong. On June 11th, you are still active. You're not inactive yet. There's a window. From June 11th to June 30th, you're still active, but there's nothing you can do to change the fact that on July 1st, you will go inactive. It's like a train headlight coming down the track. You see it coming, you can't stop it. So again, the CE is due by June 10th. If you go past June 10th and then remember that you didn't take the CE you needed to take, you are still active all the way up through June 30th. It's just that you know for a fact in July you're going to be inactive. You with me? That's a testable item. So the June 10th is the CE deadline. The 18 months from your license date is your post-licensing deadline. And then the June 30th is your pay $45 deadline. Just a reminder here, as a provisional broker, you need to be very close with your BIC. They need to know what's going on in your professional life, your transactions, your problem children, your problem clients, your people who are mad at you, the issues that might have arisen, the agents that are being jerks, all the potential things that might be turning up in any given transaction. Your BIC needs to be aware of that. If somebody might complain about you, give them a heads up. They need to know. They need to help guide you through. What do I do to list a property? What paperwork is involved? Oh, got an offer, got 3 offers. How do I handle multiple offers for my seller? Your BIC will either help you themselves or assign a mentor or a coach or some training and say, here's how we do this. There's a million moving parts to this business. If you wait to learn all of it before you actually start doing the business, you'll never start doing the business. The bulk of your learning and the actual execution of this business is on the job training, right? They start you out with the laws and the rules, which we're doing now, but to actually learn how to do it won't happen until you're licensed and out there doing it. As a PB, provisional broker, you can't be independent, got to be supervised. The BIC is accountable for you. Okay, we're going to touch on this stuff. And we're probably around page 4 or 5 of the comment section. I feel like material facts. I just told you that in the last 2 years of update courses that I had to teach, 45% of the disciplinary action was because of this last year, and 47% the year before, like 2021. 47% of people who got in trouble because they didn't disclose things properly. So what is a material fact? Give me an example in the chat of a material fact that you might be responsible for in real estate. Roof leak is always my very first thought, my first go-to. Good job. Oh boy. Deborah's coming out swinging. A meth house, Walter White, Breaking Bad meth house, my favorite material fact. I had a person in a post-licensing class one time, and we were talking about meth houses, and people were like, gosh, what does it even smell like? Because, it leaves toxicity in the house. And this one student was like, oh, it smells like this, and it's kind of like, and we were all just kind of like, okay, what are those hobbies and pastimes that she was very educated. Known plumbing issues, leaks, zoning, foundation issues, upcoming bypass. I'm seeing a mix of things. Synthetic stucco, that's a good one. A mix of topics here. A lot of ones you're mentioning are valid, and you're saying things about the property itself. That's number 1 on the slides here. There's a good one. There's an educated answer. The second one is what's down the street related to the property, like the bypass situation. Or in my case, I'm here to the east of Charlotte in Concord. I've got several things going on in my county, in the actual house I live in. I'm across the interstate from the Concord Regional Airport, for one thing. So I got to tell people if I were to sell my property, hey, there's flight patterns. I'm in sight at the end of my road of the landfill on the other side of the Charlotte Motor Speedway, both of which I need to disclose, which is right there near the Charlotte, the ZMAX drag strip, all of which are loud a couple times a year. So landfill, racetrack, airport. And then if I go about 10 minutes further north, I don't really deal with this ever, but there's a couple of neighborhoods in the 800,000+ price range across the street from what I affectionately call the poop farm. It's called Wallace Farm on Eastfield Road, and it has little mini horses that do what horses do, and they create really rich and vibrant soil that grows delicious tomatoes, but it involves, of course, fertilization, which can be a little bit smelly sometimes. So if you list $1 million house across the street and that person who wants to buy it all of a sudden smells a farmy kind of odor, and you didn't tell them that was a possibility, you might have a problem on your hands, right? So those are all related to the property, not a leaky roof, but something down the road that's affecting it. Number 3 is the fact that maybe the buyer's loan didn't get approved. You think the seller deserves to know that? So you as the buyer agent need to stop everything you're doing as soon as you get that terrible news and tell the listing agent, hey guys, bad news. My buyer looks like won't be able to buy your house after all because they need to get a loan. The loan was not approved. By the way, that might not actually end everything because sometimes you can find another lender that could actually make it happen. Sometimes things work out. So it's not the end all, but you have to disclose it. What if your seller is trying to sell and it turns out they were having trouble making their payment? And so to the point where they get a foreclosure letter in the mail. What if your seller, you're the listing agent, and your seller receives a foreclosure letter in the mail? Is that a material fact that you, the listing agent, need to tell the buyer's agent? You got it. It is. So yes, foreclosure affects the ability to perform. What if your seller doesn't get the foreclosure letter, but they are 3 months behind making their house payment? Is that a material fact, you think? This is the point where you guys are so sensitive to that scary disciplinary page I showed you, and you're like, oh, yeah, you got to tell everything. And you repeat attenders know better, but yeah, no, being behind on your house payment, not material. But if that being behind on your payment turns into a foreclosure letter, now that is a material fact. And then finally, somebody answered this geniusly, is that a word, a few minutes ago, anything the parties to the transaction care about. If your buyer cares that there used to be termites, even though it's all treated and fixed, but there used to be, that is a material fact to them that must be disclosed. If your client cares that there were pets in the house, even though the carpets were replaced or cleaned, and to you normal smellers, you couldn't tell, but to a super sensitive, hypersensitive pet allergy person, they have a really sensitive smell and they can tell. And to them, it's a material fact. A dog in the house, not typically a material fact. It's only material if the person cares about it. So that's a pretty broad definition, isn't it? It all comes back to protecting the consumer. So what if we, the broker, know a thing that you guys have just listed in the chat and we don't disclose it? Then we are potentially guilty of some version of misrepresentation or omission. There are 4 possibilities of things we could be guilty of with regard to material facts. Did we tell somebody the wrong thing? If we actually said it or wrote it, conveyed the information that was wrong, then it's called misrepresentation because we misrepresented something incorrect. If we know that something is going wrong, but we just keep our mouths shut and don't bother to bring it up, we're not saying it, we're not writing it, but we know we should. That's omission. Your mom said, don't lie to me. You lied because you didn't say it. You're supposed to tell me. You lied by omission. Remember that? So omission versus misrepresentation. Now, the next two words here that the commission would look at is, did the agent do it on purpose? Did they know that the roof leaked, but they said that the roof doesn't leak? That would be willful misrepresentation. Or did the agent know that the roof leaked and just kept their mouth shut and didn't even mention it? That would be willful omission. They knew about it, and on purpose, they kept their mouth shut. Or did the agent, let's change it up a little bit. The back property line is actually on the other side of the trees, or on this side of the trees, the row of trees back there. Let me see if I can. Is that right? There we go. So if we got our little house here, and we have the lot, that's the actual lot. Here's the little driveway. There's a row of trees back here, Leland cypress trees that provide nice screening from the neighbors. If we didn't bother to ask, are those trees on the property? They need to be on this side of the property line, but they're not. If somebody asked that question, and all we saw back there is grass and trees, and we said, I'll check and let you know. And then you forgot to check, and they forgot to follow up, and they bought it. And then they decided to cut down the trees. What's going to happen? This neighbor back here is going to be ticked off because they weren't this guy's trees. They belong to these people back here. Well, what did you do? You were negligent. You didn't ask about it. You didn't do what needed to be done to find out the deal with the trees. And so that now you're guilty of negligent omission if you didn't say anything and didn't disclose anything. If you said, I think those trees are on your property back there, but you didn't verify it, now that's negligent misrepresentation. You told them a thing, but you didn't verify it. So we'll see, and in the comment section, I'll show you. They go into that in pages 5 through like 9, I think. Here we go. It's on 4. They start talking about, here we go. There. Willful misrepresentation. There's a section for each. Sorry, I'll fix that. Come here. Come. Lay down. I'll fix my screen in a minute. But it talks about that. So you can start reading about this and continue on maybe the first 10 pages of the comment section if you want to get into these examples. So willful misrepresentation, they give us some examples here. An agent knows a listed property has severe problem with water intrusion in the crawl space when it rains a lot. In response to a question from a buyer, the agent says, nope, there's no problem. They know better, but they tell them a lie. They basically tell them a lie. Here's my favorite example that I think is probably happening a million times as we speak. This example of willful misrepresentation, tell me if you think this is possible. An agent knows that the actual market value of a home is about $225, but they go in for the listing appointment and the seller says, look, I'm not even going to try to sell my house if I can't get at least $250 out of it. And that agent says, oh yeah, I think we can do that. So the agent knows there's no way that house could sell for more than $225, but they tell the owner otherwise. Why? So they can get a sign in the yard. It happens all day long. It's happening right now. They tell a higher price and they know for a fact that it's not worth near that. Because they know if they won't do it, some agent right behind them will. Doesn't make it right. It just makes it pretty typical. I call it buying a listing. Listing the property for more than you know it's probably going to sell for just because it's what the seller wants to hear. Pretty common. And they could ultimately, what if that seller sells it and realizes it took me 6 months and the agent told me I could get the $250 and we tried it for 5 months and I finally had to drop all the way. And here's what's going to happen with overpriced property. If you price it wrong, it's going to take longer than it should. And you're going to probably end up selling it for 200 instead of 225 because you started out way too high to begin with. Because people start thinking, the buying public thinks, what's wrong with it? They don't realize that you just priced it wrong. They have to believe that something else is going on. So that's when that seller complains that they think you did the wrong thing, and that's when it all could come out. So that's how these four things come into play, and we'll talk about them another time. But willful omission, and then negligent omission and negligent misrepresentation. Catch up in the chat. Let me see here. Yeah, anything important to the parties, if the parties care about it. So it might be like this. One time I had a house for sale in a nice neighborhood in Charlotte called Radburn. It was about a $350,000 house. It was my second year in the business, and it was one of my very first upper end houses at the time, because this was 25 years ago. And so I listed it. It took the normal time back then was 2 or 3 months. We got an offer. That offer turned into a contract. The buyer had an inspection, and the inspector went under the house in the crawl space and saw on the edge of one of the boards just the tiniest little bit of surface damage of termites. The termites had nibbled on it a little bit. And usually that's not a problem. For one thing, they had treated for the termites already. The termites were long gone, and the damage they had done was just cosmetic. It didn't even matter. It wasn't structural. But for this buyer, they had come up from Florida. And in Florida, the termites are even bigger. And they had just lost a lot of money because of a termite-related issue, real estate down there. So when they moved up here and started working with their buyer as agent, they said, hey, agent, we can just tell you this. We're too sore. We're too much in pain from what happened to us in Florida with the termites. When we buy a house in North Carolina, it better not have any termites or we're not touching it. I don't care if it's fixed, treated, no termites. The fact that a termite burped on it is enough that we don't want it. So to that person, termites were a material fact, and they walked away from our contract because there was a tiniest little nibble. It's like 3 little tooth marks. It was that light. In fact, if the seller had sandpaper and had found it before the buyer saw it, they could have sanded it off. Not saying they should have, but that's how little there was, right? So yeah, they would mention it. It'd be something they would need to identify and tell you that they care about. Okay, we're going to take our break. Got a few more things we're going to talk about with these things that we could do wrong. And I'll see you back here in 10 minutes. Hey, everybody. We're back. Okay. So let's take a look at some of these matchups. Willful misrepresentation. Essentially, you're lying about it. You telling them a thing either by speaking it or writing it that you know is not true. Negligent misrepresentation means you ever have somebody in your life that you feel like they always have an answer, and only half the time do they know for sure about that answer, but they like to hear themselves talk. Might be an older person, not to throw my fellow older people under the bus, but we're bad about that. We think because we've been through a couple of years of life, we're like, yeah, this is how you do this. But half the time I'm like, do you really know? Or is that just based on one tiny little 1% exposure you had in that area, right? That's kind of what negligent misrepresentation is. You're telling them a thing, but you don't know for sure. Either because you didn't bother to go check to be sure it was right, or you were just wrong. You just had the wrong information and you conveyed it. So in this business as a broker, taking care of the consumer, you need to, if you're not sure, you need to make sure before you give the information. Say things like, you know what, that's a great question. I don't know. Let me check on that for you and get back with you. That'll save you headache and lawsuits and disciplinary action. When I was brand new, I was 23 years old in the business. And so I had a little bit of a concern/chip on my shoulder that somebody was going to jump out of the bushes at any given moment and say, you don't even own your own house. You live with your parents. How are you helping me buy a house? That's just ridiculous. Nobody ever did that. So that was nice. But I was very worried about it. And so I didn't like to not know things. But the sad thing is I didn't know a lot because I was brand new. Well, now all these years later, I know a few more things than I did back then. I even teach this stuff, so I know more than maybe the average broker because I have to, so I can teach the average broker. But now my favorite answer is that. I embrace it because it saves a lot of hassle. For one thing, how could you possibly know everything about everything? That's ridiculous to expect of anybody. So claim it. I say, great question. I don't know. Let me see how that works for your situation because every person has a different situation, right? So embrace it. Don't be guilty of negligent misrepresentation. Then we have willful omission. You knew about it and you didn't disclose it. You were just kind of saying, you know what? I hope they don't ask about the excessive mold in the crawl space in the far corner that I know about because I went back there. Maybe it's your own house. Thankfully, in this business, we're not required to go in the crawl spaces. That is not something on the list of job duties. But somehow you know about it. And you're like, you know what? I'm going to gamble that they're not going to ever find out themselves. So let me just eliminate the hassle and I'll just keep my mouth shut. So you know there's a thing and you fail to disclose it. Willful omission. And then there's negligent omission. You don't even know that there's mold down there and you didn't even bother to find out. If you're a buyer agent, you should always suggest to your buyer to have any inspections, every single possible inspection that they would ever be worried about. If they ever ask you, hey, should I get this type of inspection? Always say yes. If you're the least bit concerned about such and such thing, yes. And if they won't do inspections or survey or appraisal or something that you think they should do in the process of buying the house, and they say, you know what, I don't want to pay $500 for a survey. I've already paid $800 for inspections. I had to pay $5,000 for due diligence fee and $10,000 for earnest money. And I'm just tired of paying money. So I can see where the trees are. I can see where the property line is. I'm just not going to get it surveyed. Then you need, as a broker taking care of your future self, to pull out a paper that's called a professional services disclosure. You don't need to know that. But it's an actual document that says, hey, sign or initial here saying that I told you need a survey and you're refusing. Because I promise next year when it bites them in the butt that they should have had it for some reason, they're not going to remember that you told them to get it. Unless you can pull out that paper and say, yep, see here, remember July 13th, I told you should get a survey and you initialed that you didn't want one. That just saved you a lot of potential money. For one thing, true story, not me, but I heard about it. Somebody didn't get a survey. It was a property on a well. They found out after they bought it that the well was actually on the neighbor's property. So the house they bought didn't actually have its own well. The well that served the house was located on the property of the neighbor. That meant this person needed to put in their own well. How much is it to put in a well? Anybody know? Roughly, if all goes perfectly, how much is a well? Maybe $8,000-$10,000. Unless you have to dig and drill further down to get enough water flow, which they did. $60,000 to dig the well in that particular case. And the agent didn't tell them to get a survey. Otherwise, they would have realized before they bought it that there was no well, and therefore the agent got to pay for a well. You got an extra 60 laying around? I don't. So that agent ended up having to have money pulled from their commissions, future commissions, for indefinitely forever. Yeah, there's a nice little scare story for you. I know. Always suggest things and get it in writing if they refuse. Had another one that I heard about. It's always ones I heard about. Have you noticed this? And it was a mutual acquaintance. Me and another broker I know both know this person from our high school, and she picked him, not me, to help her buy a house when she got married. It's like a $300,000 or $400,000 house several years ago. So he helped her buy it. He did not suggest a septic inspection. When you have a septic tank, there's a box in the ground, a big box you could probably stand up in, and then it's got pipes that shoot out from it that are called leach fields. So all the wastewater, the watery part, can absorb down in the ground over time. Turns out the leach fields of the septic system of this house were destroyed. They were kind of collapsed to the tune of being replaced at $5,000 to replace it. They didn't find that out when she bought the property because they didn't have it inspected because the agent didn't tell her to. A year later, she was getting divorced from this guy that she had just married and bought the house, so they needed to sell the house, and she put it on the market. A buyer came along. That buyer had a septic inspection, which revealed the $5,000 it would cost to fix it. And she said, wait a minute, I just bought this house a year ago. Hey, agent who helped me back then, why didn't you tell me to get a septic inspection last year? Oh, he couldn't prove that he did. He might have, but he had nothing in writing to prove that he did. So she went ahead and paid the $5,000 to her buyer so she could go ahead and close on it, but then she came after him to reimburse her the $5,000. And I have a feeling behind the scenes, he went to his broker in charge and said, hey, here's a situation. She wants me to pay her $5,000. The broker in charge probably talked to the firm attorney, and the attorney says, well, you have two choices. You can either pay her the $5,000, or you can wait for her to complain to the real estate commission and they will discipline you, and then you can pay her the $5,000. They picked A. He could have saved himself $5,000 if he had something in writing proving that he had told her last year when he helped her buy it that she should get a septic inspection. Is it worth it to get that little initial on that little page? Absolutely. And a lot of brokers in charge and office managers, whoever's in charge of writing the check to you to get your portion of the commission, they will say to you, before I give you your piece of this commission, here's the following documents I need from you. Need you to turn in the agency agreement, the contract, the other contract from the other offer that came in, the professional service. That's one of the items on that list. So they make sure they have it. It's the only thing that they can use as leverage is our paycheck to make sure that we turn in the right paperwork. Good question. How long does a buyer have to come back to the agent? There's really not a statute of limitations. The Real Estate Commission requires that we keep our records, paper or electronic, for 3 years. So if somebody came back to you after like 5 or 10 years, probably a good idea to keep your stuff longer than the Real Estate Commission's required 3, just in case that sort of thing happens. What else can kind of help you? There's a thing in the business that an insurance policy called errors and omissions insurance. And it's not that expensive, and most firms require it or include it. And it might be like, I don't know, $50 a month, and maybe not even that much. Depends on how big the firm is, how many people are under the policy. It'll be cheaper the more people. So that might help. But yeah, they could come back to you after a good bit of time. So yeah, that paper, that's a good suggestion. We actually have a lot of standard forms that are provided to us by the North Carolina Association of Realtors, and that's one of them. And it's called Form 760, the Professional Services Disclosure. You got it. And just for fun, like a little field trip, let me show you. Let's see if I've got it in here for you. I don't think I give it to you in this class because you don't need it in this class. But here's what happens when you pay your dues and become a realtor. Nope, it's, what is it? NC Realtors. Yep. So you are able to log in to your realtor website, the North Carolina. When you pay realtor dues, there's a national association that some of your dues goes to. There's a state of North Carolina one, and there's a local one. The local one is tied into the MLS membership as well. But the state version, since we're in North Carolina, they have a whole bunch of forms that they've prepared. This is testable, by the way. And so if we go to the forms library, we can see all the forms that the National Association of Realtors, in conjunction with the North Carolina Bar Association, have written for us to use. So if you are a realtor, you have permission to use these forms. And right out the bat, we can see offer to purchase. We know what that is. And then here's the big list of all of them. There's 16 forms for auctioneers. There's 14 there. There's 96 related to commercial, 157. There's a ton of forms. Let's see. It'd probably be a good one under buyer forms. I bet we could find it there. Or we can just do a search. That's probably smarter. And so we'll look at the sample version. So right here, oops. Professionals, there we go. Professional services disclosure. Just a little glimpse here. You don't need to spend much time on this, but there you go. There's some pre-populated things like appraisal, warranty, HVAC inspections, a variety of inspections. There's also some blanks on the second page so you can add in whatever else case dependent you might want to suggest that they have done. And so here are the choices. They're waiving it. They don't want the survey. Okay, then initial here. Or they're saying, I do want one, so initial here. Who's going to handle it? Is it going to be the buyer? Is it going to be you? Who's going to order it? And then who is it? Are you going to make some suggestions of potential inspectors maybe? And those are the names that you might recommend. So that's it. This could save you a whole bunch of money. And this quite likely is what your office administrator is going to want from you, along with all those other forms that pertain to this transaction before they release your money to you. We're going to, and that's forms section of the Google Drive has a fair number of these things, like the offer to purchase, the property disclosure form that's required, mineral oil and gas rights, we'll see that together. Exclusive buyer agency one, we'll see that together. Exclusive right to sell, we'll look at that one, as well as additional provisions. And lead-based paint, we'll look at that one together. FHA VA, we'll take a look at that as well. Oh, there it is. The one, they put it on the very first page because it's so commonly used. Exclusive buyer agency, if I didn't already mention that. So a lot of these are going to be things we talk about in this course once we get to those appropriate sections. Okay. Some other prohibited acts that you'll see in the comments section, I think around, now I can't remember. It's either 5 or 10, but somewhere in that chunk. Guess what? We can't lie to people. We can't make promises that we don't keep. False promises is prohibited. I mean, talk about classic sleazy salesman tactics. Yeah, sure, I'll throw in the undercoat for free. And then you buy the car and you're like, wait a minute, they didn't do that part. So it's official. We can't make promise. If we make promises and don't keep them, I think it's been in the last couple of months of the bulletin, the disciplinary action, that there was a case where the agent, let me think, what was it? The agent promised a $5,000 credit to the buyer. The commission, I imagine, was 20 or 30 grand. And they promised to give the buyer $5,000 because of something, and they didn't. They didn't do it. And so that, among some other things, got them in trouble. Paying somebody without a license, called improper commissions. That gets you in trouble. That's prohibited. Incompetence, unworthiness, because you didn't use the right forms or you didn't behave yourself properly, putting the client's needs first. That's against the rules. Discrimination related things under fair housing in Unit 19 in the Yellow Book. We talk about that. We won't be there for like 8 or 9 weeks, I think. So all of these things are officially against the rules, against the real estate laws. What else can we not do? Oops. Practice law. This is not a law course. This is a real estate course. Don't be an attorney, even if you know the answer, because eventually you're going to know a lot of the things they ask. But sometimes, even though you know it, you shouldn't answer it. You should say, you know what, that's a great question for the attorney. Let's find out. Even though I ran into this last month with another client and I actually know the answer, but I don't want to be on the hook for giving you the right answer from a wrong person. Let's get it from the person whose license is on the line, right? Violation of any rule. That's my favorite rule. It's like, oh, you violated Rule 13, so now you're guilty of violating this rule too, because you violated a rule. So it's like, let's just kind of add on to it. And then other prohibited acts, lying about anything, and then there's that injunctive relief. The commission can come after people for acting and doing real estate without a license. Let's take a look at the comment section where it talks about that stuff. Find it in a minute. There we go. So here we go. Here's one of them, making false promises. Oh, there we go. I should probably share it with you. Making false promises. It's on page 7 of the comment section. An agent promises a prospective apartment tenant that the apartment will be repainted, but the agent fails to get it done after the lease is signed. Or you promise an owner that if they list their house with you, then you will steam clean all the carpets and wash all the windows. And the firm fails to get the work done before the listing contract's signed. It could also be Another thing we're guilty of is, I won't talk about dual agency yet. It won't make sense until we explain agency, but self-dealing. What does self-dealing make you think of? What do you think that might be? Putting who above the client? An example might be this. You go on a listing appointment. And usually when you go on a listing appointment, you talk to the client, you say things like, hey, let's walk through the house. Show me the house as if I'm the buyer. What do you like about the house? And so as you're walking through the house and they're explaining and pointing out all the great stuff, you start thinking, wait a minute, I really like this house. I think I want to buy it. But you know that if you keep your mouth shut, they're going to keep talking and tell you all kinds of things because they think you're there to list the house, and you originally were, but now you think you might be the buyer. You don't tell them that yet. You let them go ahead and tell you, you know what, we really need to move out to Seattle, and we got to do it by November 20th. And so if we can't get it sold for the $400,000, we'll go ahead and drop to $350 because we got to get this thing done. Because they think they're hiring you as their fiduciary listing agent, taking care of their secrets, not knowing that you are a double agent right now. That's a bad term, but meaning that you really are the buyer. You just haven't told them yet. You let them go ahead and disclose to you their bottom line. You didn't put their needs above your own. What you should have done the minute you thought, wait a minute, I might want to buy this myself. You should have said, let's stop right now. You can keep showing me the house, but don't tell me anything more. Don't tell me anything you wouldn't want a buyer to know because I might be your buyer. That would be putting the client above yourself. And to not do that would be self-dealing, putting yourself above the client. The example they give is, let's see, an agent lists a parcel of undeveloped property zoned for single-family residential use. They know the property is going to be rezoned to multifamily, which will probably increase the property value. But instead of telling the seller that that's going to happen, the agent offers to buy the property at the listed price, telling the seller they want to get it for a long-term investment. The deal closes. The agent's able to basically flip it in a matter of months for that bigger price. They should have told that seller client, look, guys, here's good news for you, and not take the profit themselves. There's the part about unworthiness and incompetence. So when we get to agency and the relationship we have with our client, we're going to learn about fiduciary duties that we have with our client, things that we have to do for them. We have to keep all their information confidential. We have to properly account for their money. We have to be obedient. Not to their every single wish and desire, because some things they might ask us to do might actually be illegal. And so we have to also educate them on what's allowable, but for the most part, follow their legal directives, be obedient to their legal requests. Loyalty, we got to be loyal to them over the other people on the other side of the transaction, and we have to disclose things. And then the last one is reasonable skill and care. That means that we have a responsibility to know what we're doing. You know which forms to use. I once had a client, and her sister wanted to buy the house down the street. The sister and fiance of the sister were trying to buy this house without an agent. And every so often the sister would call me in a panic because something else had popped up that she was worried about. Her fiance felt like he could do it, but she kept getting a little frightened about various things. I think we're in over our head. And I'm like, I'll help you. And I won't charge you what I would normally charge a buyer because I didn't have to help you find the house. I'm just coming in to help you with the paperwork and negotiate. But she just could never convince him to give in and go ahead and hire me. So it was always 3 or 4 times she'd call in a panic. One of the times she said, so this house we want to buy is for sale by owner. So it was an unrepresented buyer buying from an unrepresented seller, no agent in sight. That seller, though, had a friend in the business, had a friend who was a realtor. And that realtor friend gave the seller the offer to purchase contract to use in selling it to this little couple. Here's the thing about all those forms I just showed you. If you're not a realtor, you're not allowed to use them. That's a testable item, by the way. An unrepresented seller selling to an unrepresented buyer cannot use a realtor form because there's no realtor in the transaction. So not only did this seller's buddy in the business give him a form that he wasn't even allowed to use, probably because that seller's friend, realtor buddy, was hoping he might get included in it somehow. He gave him the offer to purchase, but my little buyer potential client that never became a client said, well, the seller agreed to pay for a warranty for us, provide a 1-year home buyer's warranty after closing, but there's no place on this contract to write it. And that was weird because there is a place on the normal contract to write it, unless you're using the one that's for land. They were using the wrong contract, as if they were buying raw land instead of a house on the property. And so, of course, there wasn't a place for a warranty. You don't ever have a warranty on raw land. And so I'm just thinking to myself, well, if you'd go ahead and just let me help you, none of this would be a problem. There kept being examples time and again that she would want to, but he never would, and they never did. And I can only imagine that they might have had a thing or two that popped up along the way. So that if that listing agent buddy that agent buddy of the seller had maybe listed the property and also suggested that same wrong form, they would be guilty of unworthiness or incompetence because they need to know what forms to use and how to fill them out properly. And diligently performing the services required and providing accurate closing statements and verifying that the information on the closing statement when you close to buy the house has all the right numbers on it. Talked about practice of law. We're going to see a lot of this stuff over and over. And then here it is, violating any commission rule, a catch-all provision. A licensee is subject to disciplinary action if they violate any rule, and they're also guilty of this one because they violated a rule, so they violated the rule that said you can't violate the rule. We'll get to it. Let me just show you on the slide. So we went over that. Oh, here's what happens. You could surrender your license. We saw that. Hey, I'll give it back. Voluntary surrender the license. Restrictions, that would be like suspending the suspension. You got to take some classes in order to have a lighter sentence on the suspension. Commingling. There's another testable item. The word commingling is a big vocabulary word. And to commingle means you're mixing your own money with the client's money, which means if you have a trust account and you're putting their earnest money in it, you can't pay your own firm bills out of that account. And you can't put your own firm money or your own earned money into that account. That account is only for your clients, for people's money that's not yours. So if you mix your money with theirs in the trust account, you're guilty of commingling. And we see quite a few of those pop up in these disciplinary cases. Need to have permission of the property owner as well as your broker in charge to run advertising. And it's built into the listing agreement when you get them to list the property with you. Part of that agreement says you give me permission to advertise. It's got a part for internet ads. It's got a part for other like print ads. But before you can advertise someone's house for sale, you've got to have their permission to do it. That kind of makes sense, doesn't it? As well as your broker in charge, their permission, or the firm. Remember, when you list a property, the listing agreement is not between you and the seller. It's between your firm and the seller. You're the one carrying it out and doing all the work, but it's the firm's name at the top of the page 1 of that listing agreement and any other agency agreement. All of them are in the name of your firm, not you. You do sign for your firm, but the firm owns those agreements. So with advertising, Got to have permission to run it. Plus, you can't run blind ads. You've got to have it in there showing the whole world that you are a broker. Can't imply or leave out the brokerage name and hope that they just think you're a seller. And then this one, anytime your clients sign things along the way, it could be agency agreements or contracts or offers or addenda or amendments. Any paperwork that they sign, you need to deliver to them within 3 days. So immediately, but not later than 3 days. So the best answer, if the test question says, when do you have to give the agency agreement that your client signed? When do you have to give a copy to them? And if the 4 answer choices are immediately, 3 days, 5 days, or 7 days, what's the best answer out of those 4 choices? You're always looking for the best answer. What's the best answer as to when you should deliver the documents? Immediately. Immediately. What if they didn't give you that as a choice? They said, when do you need to get that buyer agency agreement that they just signed? When do you need to give them a copy of it? 3 days, 5 days, 7 days, or 10 days? Well, the best choice out of those answers is 3, the first one, right? So watch for that. When I get people that have a problem with, they got something wrong on a practice exam and they just can't figure it out, it's either because they're reading too much into it, they're starting to think, yeah, but what about this? No, just work with what's on the page in front of you. And they are not thinking, they're thinking, well, it could be A, but it could also kind of be C. But you need to look for the very best answer in the situation of this one little test question. The best answer. There might be 2 that are okay, and then 1 that's much better. So you're always looking for the best answer. So you have to deliver documents immediately, not later than 3 days. And then finally, you have to keep everything involved with the transaction. That means all the paperwork. If you had to make 7 offers for your buyer before the 8th one finally went through, you got to keep all 8 of those sets of paperwork, all of that transactional stuff, plus your text chain, every text message, every email, for 3 years. Got to keep all that stuff for 3 years. It can be in paper. It could also be electronic. It could be both if you want to be redundant, but it's probably smart to keep maybe a zip drive, maybe if you want to print it out, or a cloud version, keep some on Google Drive or something, just in case. Because if the commission ever comes to pursue, maybe it's not even you that's in trouble, but you were on the other side of the transaction from an agent who got in trouble. So the commission asks you for some stuff to help them figure out what that other person did wrong. You better have the stuff. You could end up getting in trouble if they say, hey, 2 years ago you had this transaction and you're like, oh, sorry, I threw that out. I don't have that. Well, now you're in trouble, right? Now they're going to come looking closer at your stuff. So 3 years to retain the records, very testable. This whole page is very testable. What else? In order to charge people money to do real estate for them, you got to have their permission. That owner needs to put in writing that they're going to pay something, as well as your firm. Your firm also has to approve it. Here's how that could work. Why would your firm not give approval for you to make money? Well, they might not be happy with how much money you've agreed to do it for. You might be willing to list that property for 5% total commission, but the firm might say, we only do 6 here. The firm could dictate the bare minimum that they let you charge to work for people. And if their bare minimum is 6% and you've negotiated in order to hang on to that seller, because they won't list with you because they have 2 other agents they're talking to that are willing to do it for 5, what do you do? Do you have to just let it go because you can't do it for only 5? In that real world case, I would say, let me check with my broker. I'd say, hey, please, please, please. They're also going to use me to buy something as well as sell something. And if we're getting 2 chunks of money in, can't we work with them on one? And they're probably okay with that. But that would be what this would be. That's why it says BIC. Because they do have a say-so. Because, again, it's a listing agreement between the firm and your client, not just you. And so it's for your firm to decide how much money you're allowed to do this for. Drafting legal documents, we know that all we can do is fill in blanks. We can't draft things. We can't create language. We can fill in blanks of pre-printed forms. Disclosure of offers. Okay, this is a big one, guys. If you're taking a nap mentally, I get it. It's 9:13, but you need to listen to this next bit. I explained it today in an actual real world case. We talk about it all the time because this is real world stuff. Tell me this. You're a listing agent and you have a property for sale and it's a hot property. You're getting a bunch of multiple offers. And one of the agents bringing you an offer was in that pre-licensing class you had with that weird bald guy. And they say, hey, you remember me? We did pre-licensing together. Wink, wink. Just between you and me, I know there's multiple offers. How much do I need to advise my client to write this offer for so we can work together, so we can have this transaction together, so they'll pick my client's offer instead of the other 10? Are you allowed to answer that question? How much is the number I need to beat? What's the highest offer on the table? Victor knows my tricks. And most of you are kind of right, but this is the best answer. It really depends. So it depends on something that you'll never get. So it's kind of silly to even talk about it, but let's answer it this way. You would need the permission of the person who made the highest offer. So let's say you have 8 offers and it's a $500,000 house. And let me see. There we go. You got 8 off. Well, let's make it 3 offers because I don't want to write as much. So it's a $500,000 house. That is the asking price. Offer 1 is for $490. Offer 2 is for $497. Offer 3 is for $501. You're the listing agent. If offer 4 comes in and before they bring the offer, they say, hey, we were in class together. What do I need to advise my clients to make an offer for so that we can beat everybody else? Whose permission would you need to have in order to say you need to go for something over 501? Whose permission would you need? You need the permission of the one who made that offer. Are you ever going to get it? Hopefully nobody is that stupid. So while the answer kind of officially is, well, it depends. Yes, you could give them the information. You could tell them the highest offer if that person was an idiot and allowed you to. Point being, you need the permission of the highest offeror. Oh, I just slid in a real estate word on you. Heads up, little insight, future word alert. Offeror means the one making the offer. The one to whom the offer is being made is the offeree. Like referee. Has no correspondence. I just thought of the word referee. But EE is the one getting the thing, whatever the thing is. OR is the one giving the thing. Now that's one possibility. Multiple offers. Somebody asks, what's the highest offer to beat? Whose permission do you need? The one who made the highest offer. What about this question? What if there are multiple offers on the table and somebody calls in and says, hey, my client's thinking about making an offer. Do you have multiple offers right now? Whose permission do you need to answer the question if there are in existence, or how many offers are in existence right now? You got it. Of course, that is for the seller to decide. That is for the seller's, that is the right of the seller to tell you how to answer this. When should you talk about this with the seller? Probably back when you listed the property, before the offers start coming in. You got to say, hey, seller, just FYI, in the future, if we get multiple offers, you should know and let me know how you want me to handle it. because you might not want me to tell people there are multiple offers. Now, wait, some of you might be thinking, well, that sounds dumb. Wouldn't everybody who finds out there's multiple offers be all that much more incentivized to make another offer to compete and really want to not miss the chance of losing it or not miss the chance of getting it? What is another concern? What's the opposite concern to that? Why might some people actually not want to engage in a multiple offer situation? Yeah, because they're exhausted. Because another question I ask in these CE update classes every time is, hey guys, what's the worst case scenario, worst war story you have about a buyer agent situation? How many offers did you have to write for that one buyer before they finally won? And a lot of them are saying 8, 10, 23, 83. Pause with me a moment and imagine the time it takes to write one offer times 83. That is an actual huge, ridiculous exception, like over the top. But still, that's a blank ton of freaking paperwork and offers a dime. And you got to keep it all for 3 years. All that paperwork, killing a bunch of trees or electronic trees. That's a lot. But even just 8 or 10 is a lot. So it might be that buyer who just has been the loser for 8 times in a row is just, they're like, you know what, agent, I know this house is nice and all, and we do need to buy one, but I just don't have it in me to lose again. I'm traumatized. And while it might be foolish of them to think that they're going to ever win one if they're not willing to compete, that's fair. But sometimes you got to let people just be in their emotions and kind of soothe themselves and give them a minute. So fair warning. I just said that to a client today. I said, look, she texted when I told her there was an offer I was expecting. She said, well, great. Tell them that we have another person who's interested in blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, just calm down there. I know what I'm doing. No, I didn't say that. I said, well, here's why we might not want to say that. And it's your choice, client. You tell me what you want to do and I'll do it. But we might not want to tell them that there's another offer interested because it might scare them away. We don't even have it in our hands yet. Why discourage them from even making an offer? Because that might be one buyer who is just not wanting to compete. So you've hurt your client. So you got to give your client the guidance and tell them what their options are. Each firm must have a broker in charge. Each office location must have a broker in charge. Now, when you get your license, you're going to be a provisional broker. Then you're going to pick a BIC. You're going to be active provisional. Now you can go do some stuff. You're also going to be immediately what's called a sole proprietor. That is the default. And that doesn't change until and unless, because you could just choose to never do this next thing, unless you start an entity, form an entity to work within. If you never make an entity, you're always your human person name that you get paid through, then what you are is a sole proprietor for tax purposes. That is the title. And so as a sole proprietor, non-entity person, you still need a broker in charge if you're going to do any of the following 3 things. Spoiler alert, pretty much if you're going to do any kind of substantial real estate, you need a BIC. But here's the little teensy weird loophole. You need a BIC while being a sole proprietor if you're going to have a trust account. Okay, well, that's an easy thing to not have. You don't need to have a trust account to do this business. You could let other people hold that earnest money. It could even be the closing attorney. It doesn't even have to be the other firm. So that's no big deal. Having a BIC because you want to have a trust account, okay, whatever. Just decide not to have a trust account. Now you can be a sole proprietor that doesn't need a BIC. Oh, but wait. There's 2 more things that you need a BIC in order to be able to do. Look straight at the last one. If you want to have agents working for you, associates, licensees reporting to you, then you need a broker in charge. Okay, no big deal. I don't want that. I'll just do all of it myself. So the first one there and the last one there, we still don't need a BIC because we're not going to do those two things. It's the middle one that gets everybody. You're a sole proprietor who needs a broker in charge if you do any sort of advertising or promotion. Any of it. Tell me some examples of advertising or promotion. Tell me in the chat. Very valid, very common, very important. Yep, social media, all that fun stuff. Let's go old school. Let's talk about printed things. Okay, yep, there we go. Signage, newspaper. Let's talk about things that fit in your pocket. Thank you, Sheena. Business cards. If you print a business card, guess what? You've just promoted. But I didn't give it to anybody. Doesn't matter. So a sole proprietor needs a broker in charge if they do any sort of promotion or advertising, even as little as a business card. So how could you be a sole proprietor making money in this business without a BIC? So as to not be violating any of these three things. Really, the only way you could do it is if you just sit back, don't promote, don't tell anybody you're doing this. It might be more like you're retired after being an agent for 30 years. So a certain number of people know that you did this forever, and they come and seek you out and say, hey, I know you've done this forever, but you're retired now. Could you refer me to a good agent over here in this other area? And you could do that. They came to you. You didn't promote yourself. So you could be a sole proprietor receiving a referral fee because you referred somebody to someone else, but only if you didn't solicit that referral fee. If you printed out a card and said, hey, I'm retired and I'm just tired and I don't want to show houses, but I will refer you to people. Now you've promoted. Now you've disqualified yourself. But you could be a sole proprietor without a BIC receiving referral fees if they come to you asking for the referral to be made. They, the potential client. You could also theoretically do it for a buyer and actually help a buyer, but the buyer would have to come to you and say, hey, show me some houses. Help me go buy a house. But the minute you say, hey, let me help you buy a house, you've promoted, disqualified. Now you're a sole proprietor needing a BIC. You see the tiny little, you're not making a whole lot of money unless you have a BIC because of the things that require you to have a BIC are pretty big, especially that second one. But that is a very testable thing. A sole proprietor could get away with not having a BIC as long as they're not holding trust account money, as long as they don't have any licensees reporting to them, and as long as they're not doing any advertising or promotion. But for the most part, besides all that, you need a broker in charge. Work for a company that has one, or you could start your own firm, but now you're not a sole proprietor because you have a firm license. Now you're an LLC or whatever you are, but you're not a sole proprietor anymore because you started a firm. You started an entity. What's the requirement for being a broker in charge? Got to be actively licensed. You can't be a provisional broker. You got to have at least 2 years of full-time experience or 4 years of part-time. How do they measure that? It's a combination of things. It's going to be, they're going to say, how many transactions have you done? It's also going to be, did you really do 40 hours a week on average of real estate full-time for the last 2 years? Or did you also officially get an income from Bank of America full-time? And do we really believe that you did 40 hours of real estate and 40 hours with them? That's probably not going to be a test you pass. They're probably not going to believe you. Then you're going to be at best maybe a part-time agent. And now that's going to require that you did that for 4 years instead of 2. So it's more than just transaction numbers. Got to complete a course. That's the biggest one. To become a broker in charge, there is a course that we are not allowed to give you. We schools, go school, no school, can give you this course. It only is given to you by the Real Estate Commission themselves. It is self-directed, meaning you just log in, pay for it, hit a play button, and watch it and read the material, and they just guide you through it, and you leave maybe after a couple hours because you got to go pick the kids up. You come back and resume where you were, and eventually you complete that 12-hour self-directed broker in charge course. I think it's like 110 or 120 bucks. It's not even all that much. Here's the next thing. These next 2 bullet points is the timeline on when you can take that course. Let me show it to you this way. So in April of 2018, I decided to go out on my own and start my own firm. So I went on the website for the North Carolina Secretary of State website. I formed my own little LLC. And then I took that Secretary of State license number that they gave me, and I went to the North Carolina Real Estate Commission website, and I got a firm license, and I declared myself as the broker in charge. So at this point, I was a BIC of just myself on this date. At the moment I became and declared myself BIC, I had 120 days to take the 12-hour course because I needed to hurry up and learn about how to be a BIC. Even more so if I'd had actual other agents under me. It could have been that I joined a firm. When I decided to go out on my own, in fact, the last firm I was with, he was a really nice guy. We ended on good terms. He liked me. I liked him. I didn't leave because I didn't like him. I just left because the firm was named with his name. I wanted to either be at a more generic firm or my own name firm. And so he said, well, I hate to see you go. Could I make you a BIC of one of my branches? Would you be happy with that? And I was thinking to myself, I was nice. I didn't say this out loud, but I'm like, if I'm going to go through the hassle of being a BIC, I'm sure not going to be a BIC for somebody else. It's going to at least be my own firm. But I did appreciate his trust and his willingness to hire me in that capacity as a way to keep me there. But that didn't work out. I didn't want to do that. But if that had worked out, if I'd said, sure, appoint me a BIC of your Charlotte office. Well, then the minute he appointed me the broker in charge, which means told the real estate commission, Neil is our BIC now, 120 days, I could be BICing for all 98 people at that office without having taken the course yet, up to 120 days. So you kind of can do the big things before you finish the course, but you got to get the course done in those 120 days. Testable item, 120 days. What if instead of that, I went ahead and took the course first? I didn't even do any of this stuff. I didn't set up my entity. I didn't set up a firm license, none of it. Didn't declare myself BIC. I just saw that the course was in fact, when I took the course, it was in person in Charlotte. But I just decided to go ahead and take the course. Then I have a whole year from taking the course to declare myself BIC or BIC eligible. That makes sense? 2 time frames. If you declare yourself BIC, you only have 120 days to take the course. But if you take the course first, you have an entire year to declare yourself. Oh, we're at time. Let me give you this last point, and then we'll call it, and I'll see you next week. Don't leave just yet. Perfect. Wow, this is the last slide. Take the required. So once you become BIC or BIC eligible, how do you keep it? Here's the good news. It doesn't cost you any extra money. The only extra money it cost is back when you took the 12-hour course and had to pay $110 or whatever. But ever after, to keep it every year, instead of the general update CE course, you take a BIC up course. So your CE for BIC people is a BIC up, broker in charge update, plus an elective. For a non-BIC person, you are not a BIC or BIC eligible, then it's a gen up or a general update plus an elective. That's what you got to do to keep your license every year. By when? When do you have to do that CE by? June what? There you go, by June 10th. So just replace the gen up with the BIC up. And as an instructor of both, it's frankly exactly the same, except about 20 minutes. They just shorten all the modules and then add in a big specific portion of about 20 or 30 minutes every year. All right, guys, let me think. For next week, let's read pages 1 through 5, but even all the way through 10 would be great in the comments section. We will definitely get into chapter 1 and 2 next week, maybe even 3, but for the first night, 1 and 2. If you haven't done the syllabus / relink quiz, go ahead and get that done. I think most of you have done it. And definitely don't fall behind on doing those things by the end of the 10 weeks, because you're going to have them done before you're allowed to sit for the final. Questions? Officially, he wanted you to do it by tonight, but I would at least do it by next week if you haven't done it yet. The relink one, the relink syllabus quiz. And if you have questions from any of those quizzes, including that one, and you're like, it just doesn't make sense, that question. If you can remember that question, jot something down to remember it and let me know. And I'll go through it with you and help you understand why it was whatever it was. Besides that, we're good. We should be, the live stream is still going. We are